Fun fact, you can't get pregnant every day. You're only fertile for 6 days, ovulation day and the 5 days leading up to it. Natural Cycles is the only birth control app that can pinpoint your fertile window by analyzing your hormone-driven temperature trends. It's more than just a basic cycle tracking app. Natural Cycles is the only FDA-cleared and CE-marked birth control app and has helped millions prevent and plan for pregnancy naturally. Save 15% when you sign up today with code RADIO15. Learn more at naturalcycles.com.
A warmer friendly hello! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you. We're going to be joined in segment number 2 by Blake Lovell, who does such great work over at Southeastern 16. We're going to be chatting with him about what we all saw in the SEC on Saturday. We're going to be chatting with him about how it just feels like these teams are a little bit more equal than a season ago. You don't necessarily have that top team out there in the SEC, so we'll discuss who might be able to break away, who might be that top team. Is Vanderbilt perhaps that top team to beat in the SEC right now? We did this ahead of Florida versus Missouri, but we'll take a look at Florida if they're able to get their guard play figured out, if there might be some upside there. And then in the final segment, I'm going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Sunday as we hit some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, whatever you for this podcast, you do have one or two ways we fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters EM, they does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, but boy, oh boy, did we have a lot of college basketball on Saturday. Plus, in terms of answering Twitter/X questions, those will be done more towards the weekdays because, man, we've got a lot to unpack from a 120-game slate of college basketball from Saturday. So let's do so, try to find some trends, and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the Rowdy recap.
Dominance continues in college basketball. I couldn't do a recap from the Friday games, but you saw Michigan knock off USC by 30 points, and Arizona not quite as dominant of a win, but going to Utah and winning by 21, that's very rock solid. 97-78, the final. We'll also talk to Blake about just the have and have-nots in college basketball and the way that the top, we're going to call it 4 or 5 teams, have separated themselves from the rest, as Arizona is one of those top teams. They win the rebound battle 43-30. They win the turnover battle 12-9, and they go 7 of 18 from three-point range. As on this day, it was balanced scoring. Koa, Pete, Jaden Bradley, Braden Burris, all between 17 to 18 points apiece, and then Toby Awaka off the bench, 18 points, 12 rebounds. Not very often that you find a guy give you over 10 rebounds per game off the bench, but that's exactly what he's been providing. So Utah, they did not stand a chance there, but Duke has been looking a little bit fragile. Duke, they get the win, but boy, did they not come close to covering that double-figure spread. 91-87 the final, and Duke does go 12 of 27 from three-point range, and Isaiah Evans was the main man on this day, as Cameron Boozer still saw a performance, 17 points, 9 assists, but for Evans, 6 of 14 from three-point range, 28 points for Duke. They do win the rebound battle 31-24, and they actually lose the turnover battle 15-13, as for Florida State, they went 14 out of 30 from 3. They've been cold recently, but Kobe McGee off the bench, 4 of 7 from 3 for 17 points. You had Chancey Wiggins go 4 of 5 from 3, 22 points, but for Duke, they win this game at the free throw line, 23 out of 25 at the charity stripe, so they do find a way to persevere and manage to stave off that upset. For Vanderbilt, they find a way to be able to cover in a lot of places, like an 11.5 or so point spread, 83-71 final in this one for Vanderbilt, 10 of 23 from three-point range. South Carolina's had a rough go of it from the outside, 7 of 28 from 3, and Vanderbilt, they were dealing with the injury to Frankie Collins, who's probably not going to be back for quite a while, but still, you were able to get balanced scoring out of these starters. Devin McLaughlin, 15 points. Tyler Nichols, 16 points. A.K. Okareke, 17 points, 6 rebounds. And then Tyler Tanner, how about 19 points and 14 assists while going 10 of 10 at the free throw line. So Vanderbilt, they stepped up with their defense. They found a way to persevere. Purdue, other than that game that we saw against Iowa State, they've been pretty dominant. 89-73 all over Wisconsin, as Wisconsin, 4 of 25 from three-point range. That is just not going to cut it. Even though Wisconsin won the rebound battle 39-37, this Purdue team was able to go 10 of 27 from 3. Fletcher Lawyer, 20 points. Braden Smith, 14 points. So Purdue, they were able to go into Madison, go into the Kohl Center, and hand out a nice beat down there. So a nice easy cover out of them. And for BYU, they go on the road. They get a cover against Kansas State, 83-73 the final, and unbeknownst to a lot of people, BYU's been a top 30 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and a Kansas State team that's been shooting about 40% from 3 of 21 from 3. Abdi Bashir went 3 of 8 from 3. Rest of the team, 0 of 13 from the outside, and for BYU, AJ Demanston just continues to keep it rolling. 24 points, 8 rebounds. Now, he did have 7 turnovers in this game, but Kebakita, 16 rebounds. BYU wins a rebound battle, 47-35. Now, BYU lost a turnover battle, 19-12, but they did a nice job limiting Kansas State from 3-point range, so nice quality winner there. Nice quality winner out of these guys, as well as for SMU. They get a nice win at home in a tight spread against North Carolina, 97-83 the final. And North Carolina has actually been a really good defensive team this year. North Carolina went 12 of 28 from 3, but they allowed SMU to go 14 out of 27 from the outside. Kevin Miller, I refuse to call him Boopy, but he booped North Carolina for 27 points, 12 assists for SMU. Also just 7 turnovers in this game, so they kept it very efficient. Seth Trimble is coming back from injury. He had 22 points for North Carolina, but not enough to be able to get the job done here. And also being able to get the job done, how about Virginia? Road winner as an underdog. It's one of those classic unranked home teams being the favorite of the ranked road team, but in this case, the unranked home team does not get it done. 76-61 the final, as for NC State, just 5 of 20 from 3-point range, and Virginia, 13 out of 33 from 3-point range. St. Louis, main man, 5 of 9 from distance, 23 points. Virginia wins a rebound battle, 36-24. I'm sure that Will Wade certainly got into his guys, and it's going to be interesting to see what they do moving forward. And we're going to talk a lot of SEC on this podcast in the second segment with Blake Lovell, so I have to look at some of the ranked teams from the SEC that were in action. And for Alabama, they take it to Kentucky, 89-74 the final. Again, with Kentucky, the low post play has not been bad for them, but the guard play has been, as they allowed Alabama to go 15 out of 38 from 3-point range, as Aiden Holloway, 6 of 8 from 3, 26 big points. LeBaron Filan, who's been their main scorer, went 0 of 6 from 3, but team still won the game because for Alabama, they win the turnover battle 12-10. They win the rebound battle 41-37, and Ortega Owe supplied 22 points, but he was the lone starter for Kentucky that had over 7 points in this game. Jalen Lowe was able to provide 21 points off the bench. He's dealt with injury, so we'll see if he's an X factor, but not a good performance there from Big Blue Nation. Not a great performance from Oklahoma State. They entered in this game 12-1, and they took a beatdown from Texas Tech, 102-80 the final. Certainly Texas Tech has some defensive issues that they need to correct, as they only forced Oklahoma State into 8 turnovers, but they themselves only 7 turnovers, and JT Toppin, boy, he topped it off. 23 points, 14 rebounds. Lawan Watts, Christian Anderson, 19 points apiece, as Texas Tech 17 out of 37 from 3-point range. So nice big winner out of them. Nice big win for Houston. They were down in much of this game. As a matter of fact, at the half, they were down 33-28. They don't quite get the cover here, but they do find a way to persevere, get the job done, 67-60 the final. As for Cincinnati, defense continues to be rock solid, but on offense, 15 turnovers to Houston's 8. That really decided this game. As for Houston, they had Kingston Flemings supply 19 points, 6 assists. Milo Zuzan has been rough from 3-point range, but when they needed him most, he was there. 4 of 7 from 3, 18 points out of him. Nobody else for Houston with more than 8 points, but Houston finds a way to win that rebound battle, 34-30, so they stave off an upset in terms of the SEC. Getting back to them, Georgia, 104-100 overtime winners over Auburn. We'll certainly talk Georgia with our good friend Blake Lovell. As for Georgia, they've been a rough 3-point shooting team, but they found it on this day. 11-29 from the outside. Main guy, Jeremiah Wilkerson, 4 of 10 from 3, 31 points for Auburn. They actually win the rebound battle 50-35, but lost the turnover battle 13-11. And Taj Pettiford, he has been just up and down all season long. They had to bring him in off the bench in this game. He did provide 25 points, but he continues to shoot less than 32% from 3-point range. And main man for Auburn continues to be Keshawn Hall, 20 points, 7 rebounds, but might have needed a little bit more out of him to be able to get it done on this day. Being able to get it done on this day was Arkansas, 86-75 all over Tennessee, as Tennessee has had turnover issues all season long. They played even up 14-14 in terms of turnover battle, but they went 12 of 23 at the free throw line. Arkansas, 29 out of 33 at the free throw line, with Darius Acuff supplying 29 points. Malik Thomas, 18 points. Thomas goes 3 of 4 from 3, and Arkansas only 7 of 23 from 3-point range. And Jacoby Gillespie, he supplied Tennessee with 14 points, but their main scorer was actually Amari Evans off the bench with 16 points. Nate Amon, 13 points. Been a little bit of a disappointment down low, only about 3 rebounds. And Tennessee, you think that their forte would be rebounding, 36-33. They do lose the rebound battle. And for Kansas, they get Darian Peterson back in this game, but they do not get the job done against Central Florida, 81-75 the final. And you had 2 boneheaded fouls late in this game. Kansas is down 4 points with like 15 seconds to go. They fouled Trey White on a 3, and White was able to give the team 14 points and 11 rebounds. Peterson, in his return, 23 minutes, 26 points. He was solid, but then Kansas fouls on an and one, down 1 point with like 10 seconds remaining, so that was not great. But what was solid for Central Florida was being able to win the turnover battle 12-6. That's a big reason why they got it done. Riley Kugel, 19 points. He did foul on that 3-point shot, but still he was able to do it up for Central Florida. Is now 12-1 and currently unranked. That'll be changing. They do find a way to be able to persevere, get the job done. And for Illinois, no cover, but they do get the win over Penn State, 73-65 the final. And for Penn State, 8 of 38 from 3. Illinois not much better at 6 of 27 from 3-point range. Illinois wins a rebound battle 48-37. And Penn State, to their credit, they do get the cover. They've been good at taking care of the ball. Penn State won the turnover battle 10-7. And Tomislav Ivicic just does not look healthy. Played 17 minutes with 0 points in this game, but his brother Big Z was able to provide 10 points off the bench. And David Barosic, 13 points, 10 rebounds, and then you got 16 points out of Keaton Wagler for Illinois to be able to get the job done there. In Iowa, the defense continues to be magnificent for them. They take down UCLA 74-61, and for UCLA, they were down 40-22 at the half. A little bit more respectable in the second half, but too little too late for UCLA. They've been a great 3-point shooting team, and they went just 3 of 14 on this day. And for Iowa, they actually lose the turnover battle 14-12, but they went 22 of 26 at the free throw line, and Bennett Sturtz came up in a big way. 4 boards, 5 assists, 27 big points out of him. So Iowa finds a way to be able to get the job done there. If you're looking at some of the unranked teams that were going at it, we had some very interesting games. St. John's, they completely upchuck against Providence. They were up 10 points with about 8 minutes remaining. Providence, a 25-9 run to end the game, 77-71. They take down St. John's. At St. John's, 7-31 from 3-point range for Providence. Guy that came up very big in this game, Stefan Vox. He had 16 points off the bench, 4 of 6 from 3-point range. And for Providence, they did a solid job on the glass. They do lose a rebound battle, 51-44, but they had themselves a quartet of shot blocks, as you had Oswin, can't pronounce his last name, give you about 9 rebounds. And for Providence, they were able to play even up on the turnover battle, and St. John's has nobody but themselves to blame for this one. They go 24 out of 37 at the free throw line. That is just simply not going to cut it out there in the ACC. You saw Wake Forest be able to get the job done against Virginia Tech, 81-78. No cover for Wake Forest, but they did do a nice job in terms of being able to win the turnover battle in this game by kind of 19-11. And Virginia Tech still dealing with the injury to Toby Lual. He's a double-double machine that's out for them, so bit of an issue. And for Virginia Tech, just those dead possessions were very costly, as Nate Kalmezi, he was able to spy 25 points for Wake Forest. For Baylor, we saw the debut of Mr. James Nanji, the former 31st overall pick, and he wasn't too impressive. TCU, a 69-63 win for Baylor, just 5 of 21 from 3-point range. Baylor's defense looks to be a little bit better, but Nanji, 16 minutes off the bench, 5 points, 4 boards, pair of turnovers. Don't overrate these G League guys making their debuts, by the way. These G League guys, they are professionals, but man, they're in the G League and not the NBA for a reason. And for TCU, 8 of 20 from 3-point range. They won the rebound battle 43-34, and they played even up on the turnover battle 11-11. So a nice quality winner out there. In the Big Ten, this was a quality winner as well, as you saw Minnesota go on the road, take it to Northwestern, 84-78 the final for Minnesota, a relatively slow and controlled team, but Northwestern has not been the same defensively this year. Nick Martinelli had 26 points, 19 points apiece out of Jaden Reed and Arrington Page, but nobody gave them any help. And Cade Tyson, 24 points. He has been very good for this Minnesota team, so they do find a way to be able to get the job done out there. Out there in the CAA, Towson, who had 2 losses in conference play all of last season, they're up to 3 losses in conference play. Mama, 62-48 winners in this one for Towson. 18 out of 66 from the floor. They do a nice job winning the turnover battle 15-10. They were able to grab some offensive rebounds in this game, but just absolutely nothing doing for them whatsoever. So that was a little bit of an issue. If you're looking at your top and bottom teams in terms of against the spread record in all of college basketball, right now that best team, that would be our good friends William and Mary, who they were not in action on Saturday, so we'll be seeing them coming up. But Portland State, they are now 9-1 against the spread. It looked like things were lost for them. They were down 9 points with 2 minutes remaining against Idaho State, and being someone who laid 2.5 points with Idaho State, I am none too pleased with this one. Idaho State blows the game as they lose in overtime by kind of 93-87, and scary Terry Miller, he supplied this Portland State team with 25 big points. He was able to provide 4 assists as well, and for Idaho State, 13 out of 32 from three-point range. They win the rebound battle 32-28, 20 out of 30 at the free throw line compared to Portland State's 22 out of 26 at the free throw line. That turned out to be a big giant difference in this game. Hofstra has been an incredible team against the spread thus far this season. They are now 11-2 against the spread. They've really been that CAA team that has been able to rise up, and they get it done against Drexel by a count of 70-67. Now, depending upon your line, a lot of places they close Hofstra as a 4.5 to a 5-point favorite. They were unable to cover that, but they still have been plenty impressive, and Cruz Davis continues to be rock solid. 20 points, 6 boards, 5 assists, so you didn't quite get a cover there, but Hofstra has been a team that's been able to make you money all season long. Miami of Ohio, now 10-2 against the spread. They were a home underdog against Akron, and guess what? They find a way to stay undefeated outright, and they get the job done once again. How about a nice quality 76-73 winners as Brent Byers was able to step up? He had 26 points for Miami of Ohio, just 11 of 35 from 3, and their bread is buttered from being able to launch from 3-point range, but they force Akron into 15 turnovers. Akron just 8 of 32 from 3-point range, so Miami of Ohio, they stay profitable. They get it done for you. Tarleton State has been a team that has been able to get the job done for you all season long, and they played a tight one against Cal Baptist. In this one, Tarleton State finds a way to persevere, 81-76. The final is about a 1.5 point underdog. Dior Johnson has been the main attraction for this team as he's been able to average 22 plus points per contest. And this game comes up with a nice 34-point 3-steal performance. And for Cal Baptist, you did have Dominique Daniels do a nice job supplying 25 points. But for Cal Baptist, 21 turnovers in this game. That's how Tarleton State was able to find a way to persevere, get the job done. Other teams have been very profitable for you this season. Sam Houston has been one of those teams. We're going to be seeing them coming up on Sunday. We're going to be seeing Wagner at 7-2 against the spread coming up on Sunday as well. And Idaho State was one of those teams. They're now 9-3 against the spread, but the team that has really not been able to cover numbers, how about Texas Southern, ladies and gentlemen? They're now 1-9 against the spread. This has not been a good season for them whatsoever. They do not cover against Southern, 84-73 the final. Texas Southern has just been a big giant mess, so that's a team that you might be looking to fade. We're going to have one of our biggest fades coming up on Sunday as well. Marquette is currently 2-11-1 against the spread, so that's been none too pleasing. But Boston College, if you're looking for a team that's been a disappointment, how about 3-11 against the spread for them thus far this season? On Saturday, Boston College, they take an L to Georgia Tech by a count of 65-53. Boston College just has not been able to get anything going on offensively, and for Ole Miss, they're 3-11 against the spread as well, so they've been two of your bigger fades in the power conferences. And getting back to Boston College, you did have Broden Kapke be able to give you 13 points, 11 rebounds, but they shot 27% from the floor and 4 of 29 from 3-point range, so less than savory there. And again, with Ole Miss, we'll talk a little bit about the SEC with Blake Lovell. On the flip side, they take a big giant loss in this one, Oklahoma, 86-70 the final. And for Oklahoma, they went 11 of 28 from 3-point range, completely dominated the boards, 40-33. And for Ole Miss, they're just not generating turnovers the way that they have in the past. Oklahoma, just 7 turnovers in this game. You did have Malik Dia supply 17 points, and Peyton Prinkins off the bench had 25 points, but AJ Storr, 8 points. He's had actually a nice season if you look at the raw stats, but man, that was a little bit rough. And then you saw Missouri get the job done against Florida, 76-74 the final. As for Missouri, 8 of 22 from 3-point range, and Florida, they've got really good low post play. They played even up 37-37 on the glass, but they had more offensive rebounds than Missouri. They did a nice job with their 4 blocks, but for Florida, 7 of 27 from 3-point range. Boogie Fland, another flop, 6 points in this game. Urban Klavstar off the bench has actually been their top 3-point shooter. He went 1 of 3 from the outside, but for Missouri, nice outright money line winner there. And if you're taking a look at your top over and under teams at all of college basketball, top over team is going to be in action on Sunday. That'd be Denver. They have played all 12 of their games to the over, but this Louisiana Monroe team, boy oh boy, have they been playing a bunch of overs. All but 2 of their games have went over the total. I believe that they played on Friday, and they played yet another over in that one, so that's interesting. Actually, Texas State, they played against them on Saturday. Texas State, 84-79 winners, so that was another one. This Louisiana Monroe team playing absolutely absolutely no defense whatsoever right now. Eastern Washington, a team that has really not been playing a lot of defense themselves. They have played all but 2 of their games to the over 84-82. Eastern Washington gets a cover against Idaho, but that was a total of 158.5 to 159. That does go over the total, and you're looking at your top under team. That would actually be UT Arlington. All but one of their games have went under the total thus far this season. It has been an almighty slog for them, and they finally got that first over. As for Southern Utah, they have been a sieve defensively all season long. UT Arlington, 86-77 winners, so yay verily out there. Have to do this before San Diego State and Boise State went final, but as I was looking, San Diego State was up 16 points, so we're seeing them being able to just really find their sea leg, so we'll see if they're able to pull that one out, as Boise State entered in the night 2 overs to 9 unders, so we'll see in the AM if that one is able to come through. And if you're taking a look at trend-wise, what we're getting in college basketball right now, it has been a very even-steven season with regards to the overs and the unders, with a few games pending for Saturday, as I have to have this up by midnight Pacific, 3 o'clock a.m. Eastern. 1,180 unders to 1,179 overs. Doesn't get much more even than that. Favorites are only covering at now 50.2% against the spread. The underdogs have had themselves a nice go of it ever since Christmas. Favorites 1,172, 1,161, and 41 against the spread. If you look at the last 7 days in college basketball, favorites are rating at 46.5%, 148, 170, and 4 against the spread. Meanwhile, 161 overs, 161 unders, and a few pushes along the way in terms of those totals over the last 7 days. So that's where we're seeing college basketball right now, and that's where we're all getting trend-wise. Coming next, let's talk a little SEC with our good friend Blake Lovell of Southeastern 16 right here on Kennesaw St with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. We're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Kentucky with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by this man as we got Blake Lovell aboard. He does such great work over at Southeastern 16, looking at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. Obviously, the SEC is his forte, but he does a great job taking a look on so many different fronts at what we're getting in this great game of college basketball. He's dialed into a little bit of everything out there in the great state of Tennessee and so much more. You're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at the Blake Lovell. Last name is spelled Lovell. And Blake, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks as always for having me, Greg.
Always great to have you aboard. And Blake, we just got SEC play started. We've don't have all the finals from Saturday, but we've got quite a few of them. And how do you take a look at right now how the SEC is shaping up? Because it does appear as though Vanderbilt might be separating themselves a little bit as that top team. That again, they did play one of the weaker teams in South Carolina. But that said, it just feels like it's shaping up to be a conference where there's going to be a lot of attrition between these teams. And the margins just feel thinner in the SEC than they have in the past, where we just don't have that dominant team this year.
Yeah, and I think that's what's going to be interesting is you're going to have a lot more, I think, kind of interesting games at the top, especially because I think you've got some teams that, while good, may still lose some games to teams that are in the middle of the pack or something like that. I just think you're going to see that happen a bit. I don't know if there's going to be that much separation, because again, I think we still can pick things apart with pretty much every SEC team, except I will say like maybe Vanderbilt, there's not a lot to pick apart to this point, but that's just simply going on, current performance versus projecting ahead, which once they start playing, teams that are going to be different matchups and all that, sure, they're going to run into some issues at certain, spots in certain areas and everything. But I think, right now, it just seems like you're kind of looking at these teams and trying to really get a good grasp on what they are. And I feel like a team like Georgia, getting a nice win against Auburn, like that's their biggest win of the season. is to beat this Auburn team. And it does tell you a little bit of something, I think, about Georgia, is that if they can work their style, they're going to be hard to stop. They're so good offensively. So maybe that's something we take away from Georgia. You mentioned Vanderbilt. Yeah, I mean, they go on the road. They get what looks like just pretty much kind of a blah 12-point win at South Carolina. But when you factor in the fact that they're playing without two of their probably top three guards and Duke Miles and Frankie Collins, it's still pretty impressive, and I think that's just kind of been, what they've been all season. Alabama gets a nice win against Kentucky. Arkansas, obviously with Darius Acuff, gets a big win against Tennessee. So I think it's teams like that. How do we see how they set themselves apart? And, do we see a Florida? Do we see a Kentucky? Teams like that, can they get back up there into the top two, which is where they were projected heading into the season? Plenty of storylines still to work with in SEC play.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And I do think that there's a little bit of, shall we say, a difference in styles as well, because obviously you've got your warp speed teams. Vanderbilt is looking to play up tempo. Alabama is looking to play up tempo. And then Tennessee, it feels like they've sped themselves up a little bit this year, but there are some teams that are looking to build themselves through the post, which I think that's fair to say. Kentucky actually has been a little bit this year as well. And then there are other teams like Alabama that they're going to be all guard play, and they just don't have as much down low as they've had in past seasons.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be interesting, is like when you see some of these teams that do have, it seems like a lot of depth at guard. If they're lacking some things in the front court, or if their front court's not as consistent, what does that look like when you play one of these teams that maybe doesn't have the guard play, but yet does have, 6'10" and 7 foot or whatever, and you're kind of having those kind of matchup things of which area is going to dictate the game. I think that is kind of going to be something I feel like that really stands out in some of these matchups. And so I think that's going to be interesting, and really, he mentioned like the contrast in styles. I mean, my goodness, to be sitting here and looking at some of these teams offensively, again, whether it's Vanderbilt, not surprised to see Alabama as good as they've been on the offensive end, but whether it's Vanderbilt, being kind of a top 5 offensive type team in the country, whether it's like Arkansas and Georgia, who at times have just looked fantastic on the offensive side of the court. I mean, even like a team like Oklahoma, I think has been a little bit underrated in terms of maybe how they're playing now versus what they look like a little bit early in the season. So yeah, like you're getting a lot of teams that I think are going to make for interesting, just pure basketball matchups when it comes to how these rosters are comprised. But, the thing is, it seems like the SEC kind of does have a defining style where eventually you're going to get more of these physical games at the rim, more free throws, probably not a league that's going to shoot it great from three. The teams that can play that style effectively and or be what an Alabama's been in recent years, or again, kind of what they've been this year, just be so good offensively that it doesn't matter. Those are going to be the kind of teams I think you're going to see at the top.
No question. As Blake Lovell, who does such great work over at Southeastern 16, he's joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And the team that I really think is interesting right now is Georgia. I know that you've talked about them a little bit, and I feel like we both didn't necessarily have the highest of expectations for Georgia coming into the year, but they get the job done in overtime against Auburn on Saturday. It's a team that just continues to generate turnovers, and they continue to lack with regards to their three-point shooting. I think that that's fair to say. They were able to get things going on Saturday on that front, but how do you take a look at this Georgia team? Because when I take a look at just a team that could be able to surprise out there in the SEC, not just in conference play, but perhaps in the NCAA tournament, I just keep coming back to this Georgia team because I'm liking what I'm seeing out of them.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing is like, listen, there's no team that I swung and missed on more, I feel like, in the offseason than Georgia, just because I looked at the roster and just did not have a great feel of what was going to look like when the pieces came together. And I think now, again, Greg, I would have never predicted that Georgia would be playing at the pace they're playing at right now, second in the country in terms of average offensive possession length at 14.2 seconds. It's just not something I would have expected to think about, kind of with, even for Mike White, like he has had some teams that have played a little more up tempo, but it's kind of been more of, in the middle. If you really look at even going back to the start of his Florida tenure, but if you go back to Louisiana Tech, that's the thing. The reason he had so much success because they were playing as fast as any, like they were just playing at such a high octane type style. And I think that to me is going to be interesting to see how that carries over now into SEC play. And we've seen it one game in. They still find a way to score 104 against an Auburn team that I think I just don't have a great read on. I think their defensive numbers, I was wondering, hey, is it just because they're not a great defensive team that they're ranked, closer to 90-ish, 100 or whatever in defensive efficiency? They played so many good offensive teams like Michigan, Arizona, Purdue, and so forth. But now I'm like, hey, maybe that's not all Auburn's defense. Maybe that a lot of that has to do with just Georgia being this good offensively with Blue Kane and Jeremiah Wilkinson. Smurf Philander steps up, has a big game against Auburn. I think I'm buying in on Georgia now because I think they are going to be able to play a way that even in games where it feels like they're maybe outmatched at certain positions, they have enough of a cohesive unit that is sort of executing the style right now to where they're going to simply go out and outscore teams. And I think that's going to happen a lot for Georgia. And really even, look at games they played this season, even in the Clemson game. They lose that one 97-94 in overtime. I just think that's what we're going to see a lot of with Georgia this year. And yeah, I'm kind of buying in on Georgia being a maybe even a lock for the NCAA tournament at this point.
Yep, it's going to be a lot of fun to look at this Georgia team. A really nice win for them, and their lone loss came in overtime against Clemson, so that really looks good for them right now as we do have Blake Lovell, who does such great work over at Southeastern 16, joining me on Coast to Coast Soups, and going to be interesting to see what we get out of Florida versus Missouri, as that was a late game on Saturday. We did have to do this interview prior to that, but how do you take a look at a team like Florida? Because when you look at the metrics themselves, I feel like this has been one of the more unlucky teams in all of college basketball, and we know that Florida is going to be one of the best teams down low. I think the big question is the guard play, and I keep coming back to this, and I want to get your thoughts. It feels like Boogie Flan just has not been able to live up to his billing, and perhaps Florida would be a little bit better off and might be able to hit that peak if they give a little bit more playing time to Irvin Klavzar, who's been like the lone guy that's been able to knock down threes for them.
Yeah, and I think the depth for Florida at guard has not really been what we thought it would be, and I think that's where maybe you're expecting a few more guys get more minutes, but it's really been, like you said, Klavzar has played probably even a little bit more than we expected this year, but he's really the guy that if they're looking at Florida and you're saying, how do I figure out how to defend these guys? And I'm looking at their front court and I'm looking at the three and Tommy Houck, I'm just like, there's no other choice but to make them shoot. And I think that's what every team should do. Like you said, we will know the result of Missouri, Florida by the time people are listening to this. But I think if I'm defensively, whether it's Missouri, whether it's anybody else, I am just daring Florida to beat me from three. The thing about that is they're such a good offensive rebounding team that, they're going to naturally get offensive rebounds. But you have your best chance if you're like, hey, Boogie Flan beat us from three. Xavier Lee, who, by the way, it took a lot from Florida early on. We heard all the backlash and boy, he was not playing well, but he started to figure it out. And I think that if you kind of have a situation where Boogie Flan is not that just complete game changer, take over the game type 25 plus point scorer in some of these big games, you're going to need Xavier Lee to kind of continue on the track he's on. I'm glad he's playing better now. But yeah, Florida's strength is still going to be 3 through 5 position-wise. I just think that when you look at what they're going to sport out there, there's not really any team in the SEC, I think, that's going to be able to match what they're doing, whether it's Houck, whether it's Condon. Ruben Chenyolu, I think, has been the best defensive player in the SEC to this point, if you look at all the numbers. So there's a lot, I think, about Florida that we can like, but it's going to be different this year, Greg. If Florida makes another Final Four run, if they figure it out, win the SEC, it's going to be, yes, part of the front court is going to be kind of the story, but it's not going to look the same in the back court just because of how dynamic they were a season ago. They just haven't reached that level yet.
No question about it. The three-point shooting, I think that we are seeing how big Walter Clayton was on that front and how much he has missed. And again, we're doing this before the Missouri game, so that could be changing our opinion to the positive or the negative a little bit on them. But I do think that that's going to be a very fascinating team. And just looking all around the SEC as well, I do think that there might be a little bit of untapped potential with that game that we saw on Saturday between LSU and Texas A&M as well. A&M found a way to get the job done. And I know that you were a little bit bearish on A&M with Mackenzie Mbakpo being out once again due to injury. I know that that's a guy that you really like, but it does feel like Texas A&M has great depth. But even in the loss, I do like what I'm seeing out of LSU, a team that by many people, including myself, was picked in the bottom two of the SEC. And I think LSU, even in that losing effort, showed that they are going to be much better than a lot of people expected this season.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing is like you look at LSU, I admit I was a little surprised they go on the road and only lose by 3 here. No Dayton Thomas, who I think to this point, certainly if you're picking the top 10 players in the SEC, he's there. I mean, he's been one of the top 10 players in the league, in my opinion. So to go on the road, play an A&M team that have been scoring 500 points a game, it feels like the last 3 or so, they put up 111 plus, I think, against Jacksonville, East Texas A&M, and Prairie View A&M. They're working that buckyball type style. And so comes back here to a 75-72 game. And I think that's the thing with LSU is I feel like, if Thomas plays in this one, they probably win the game, Greg, and that would have been a very impressive win to me. It kind of tells us, too, don't forget, LSU has the win over SMU. I mean, SMU got a huge win on Saturday as well against North Carolina. So I think it kind of shows you that, to me, these may be the two teams. I don't know if spoiler is the right word, because I think they both are capable of making the NCAA tournament, and they may be the two at this point that kind of define whether the SEC gets, X amount or another amount. Like, I think that's what it's going to come down to, is maybe these two teams. But yeah, I think I am still pretty high on both of these coming out of this game. It's easy to overreact, just depending on how things go in game one. But I think if you're LSU and you tell me you lose by 3 on the road without your starting point guard, who's kind of done everything this season, you're probably okay with that and feeling pretty good about where you are moving forward because of how Nwoko's played, how McKinnon's played, Markel Sutton, who didn't have his best game in this one. But I think you're feeling pretty good. I mean, for A&M, I think even without Mbako, I was very high on him and thought he'd kind of be the guy who would change things for them. But we're going to see, because that's a good start for them. They got a pretty tough schedule for the first, week and a half, 2 weeks of SEC play. And so I think that was a big win just for A&M to get that one off the start. And I do think, again, a team that plays a very high octane style, they're going to come out and just make shots on nights and beat teams because they're just going to outscore them. And I'm okay with that, because you remember, Greg, I don't know, probably 5, 6, 7 years ago, we were talking about some of these SEC games that were like 50-48. And we're like, well, this is kind of the way it goes in this conference right now. You got a lot of teams who are just going to throw it off the backboard and see if they can get rebounds and shoot free throws. But if you look this year, it's like, hey, we got Alabama, Vanderbilt, Arkansas, Georgia, A&M, like I mentioned, Oklahoma. Like, there's a lot of fascinating offensive teams. Auburn's a great offensive team, I think. I'd much rather, get some of these games that are played up here in the high 70s, 80s, 90s, or whatever, versus some of those we were getting before.
Yep, and the LSU offense has really been a nice find for this conference, as well as they've been one of the more efficient teams in terms of points scored on a per possession basis in all of college basketball. So that's been a nice surprise. And Blake, you do a great job with the SEC, but I know that you do a great job covering just all things college basketball. And this could be an SEC team. This could be a team from a different conference. It's Steelers' choice here. Just a team or two that you're taking a look at now that conference play is starting, and you're just very intrigued by them, and you feel like they have some upside moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I mentioned kind of some and how they tie into the SEC, like even like an SMU, UCF, I think both teams who on Saturday got significant wins. And again, those are teams that, we've seen Vanderbilt play both of those teams. I mentioned the LSU game, of course, SMU winner, UCF, A&M, like you have all the kind of tie-ins on the teams we just talked about. So yeah, I feel like those are two kind of great candidates, because we always see this, right? There are teams like that who start conference play with a big win, and it's always about kind of how you follow it up. Well, for SMU, what do you know? The schedule, I don't want to say couldn't set up any worse, but now they go back-to-back games. They're at Clemson, they're at Duke. So, like, you really learn about teams like this, I think, early on. It's not too early, I think, to kind of react to some of these results and see where teams stand, especially when you're looking at conferences like this. And, again, whether it is a team like UCF, who, to this point, resume has been a little bit lackluster, but they get the win against Kansas. They've got winnable games coming up, I think, over the next couple of weeks before they hit that stretch where they got to play, I think it's Arizona and Iowa State in a span of like 3 or 4 days. Yeah, I think teams like that, who maybe some people are sort of projecting in the middle of the conference, wherever you want to place them, if you come out in game one and you get one of these kind of big momentum swing type wins, those are the teams that I think are most interesting moving forward, just because, again, you kind of are now out of the non-conference portion. You've heard people say, well, we've not played a tough enough schedule or whatever. I feel like those are the teams to me that I have the eye on the most, because they have much more to prove right now than the teams we, again, already kind of have a pretty good feel on what they're going to be.
Yes, it's going to be a lot of fun, and we've got ourselves a lot of intriguing teams. I feel like we've had a lot of surprises this year, and on that front as well, I do want to close it up here. How much do you take a look at the divide between the haves and the have-nots in all of college basketball? Because while we have a lot of surprising teams, I just feel like those top 4, top 5 teams with the likes of for example, Michigan, certainly your number one team in all of college basketball, a team like UConn, a team like Arizona, Iowa State, they just have made a big divide between themselves and the rest of college basketball. And I feel like the entirety of the SEC teams, not named Michigan out there in the Big Ten, all these other teams, they're just trying to play catch up to really those top 4 teams and that top creme de la creme tier right now in the sport.
Yeah, and that's the thing, because like if you're picking it right now, you're probably like, well, are we going to get a last year where it's like, all right, all these top seeds, they just are destined to face each other in a Final Four type setting. We always say it's about the bracket. We haven't seen the bracket, won't see it for a couple months. But if you're telling me that in any combination of matchups, right now I'm going to pick against Michigan, or I'm going to pick against Arizona or an Iowa State, maybe that fourth team for some people would be up for debate. You want to pick a Purdue, a UConn, Zags, like, again, shuffle those teams around. Still, I think Houston's a team, Duke, of course. There's so many teams like that to where that 1 and 2 line is going to be very, very strong. And seeing 1s versus 2s, in a lot of those regional finals is not going to be a big surprise this year, like you said, based on, I think, seeing what we've seen. And I think, again, it's not always who you beat, it's how you beat them. And I think that's the thing I've kind of been pushing the most with a team like Vanderbilt in the SEC, because there are people who are not as sold on them. And yes, if they played Michigan right now, I'd probably still take Michigan by double digits. That's how good Michigan's been. But I think it's performance-based stuff right now that kind of stands out the most, because everyone's not played an equal schedule. And everyone won't play an equal schedule by the time they finish in conference play. It'll be more tested, but you're still not going to play the same. So you have to kind of base it for me on just overall performance. And that's where, when I look at a team like Michigan, who is the clear number one team, and I say that knowing how high I've been on Arizona and how good they've been too, I just think it is one where you're seeing teams like that. We shouldn't be surprised at all if we're looking up 3 months from now like, oh yeah, it was a no-brainer. Of course Michigan was going to win the national title. Or of course Arizona was going to find a way to win the national title. Or one of these other teams that are kind of in that same stratosphere. Once you start to see, beyond whatever, that group of 8, 9, 10, whatever it is, I just think there's a clear gap based on what we've seen to this point.
Oh, there's no question about it. It has been just dominance, what we've seen out of Michigan thus far. I had never before in my life seen a conference game between two ranked teams with a spread over 20, and Michigan covered it easily. Man, it has been fun to take a look at them, and it's always fun to be talking college basketball to you, Blake, because you do such an excellent job being able to decipher this sport. I know you're hard at work taking a look at the SEC and really everything that we're getting in all of college basketball. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, always appreciate it, Greg. Yeah, you can find us over at Southeastern 16. Of course, all our SEC basketball coverage over there daily. And yeah, everything else college basketball related, you can find me on Twitter/X at the Blake Lovell.
And Blake is doing such an amazing job looking at this great game of college basketball every single time he joins me. He lends such great insights that he did so once again today. So big thanks to Blake for joining me right here on Coast to Coast Soup, now a part of the VSiN family of podcasts. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Sunday as we hit some big shots. Here, lovely Las Vegas, for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family podcast. Always great to be joined by Blake Lovell, who does such great work over at Southeastern 16, looking at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. Every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights and did so once again today. So a big thanks to Blake for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Sunday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at gunit_81, and we're going to be going in Las Vegas rotation order. This is where we go with the games involving bigger conferences first, and then the games that are going to be at the bottom are going to be the NEC games. So anything not named the NEC is up top in time order, and then you get the NEC games at the bottom. 777, 778 is how we started off. Seton is going to be playing us Creighton. Creighton is a underdog here of 2.5 to 3.5 points. 138.5 to 139.5 is the total line. I said Seton is a 4.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. It's a Seton team that's just been so supreme with their defense and being able to slow the games down. Seton is 303rd in terms of total possessions per game and 9th in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. That goes a third in their home games, and this has been a Creighton group that just has not really been able to find their bearings on offense. It's looked a little bit better for them ever since conference play has began, and you do have Josh Jicks, who's been able to step up as a go-to scorer with about 12 points per contest. Should throw in their 3 assists per game, and it's an okay 3-point shooting team. They shoot about 35.2% from 3. One thing that Creighton is going to do is they're really not going to get physical with you. By that I mean they're outside the top 300 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but also a top 20 team in terms of not putting teams on the free throw line. So I think that actually bodes very well for the under, even with Creighton being a top 75 team in terms of 2-point shooting percentage. Austin Schwartz has really been a man that has been able to step up for this team recently as well, only averaging 9.5 points per game for the season, but 9+ points at each of the last 6 games, so he's been able to produce. And on the flip side for Seton, AJ Sam McCray along TJ Simpkins have been able to average about 24.5 points per game in the backcourt, and it's a pedestrian 3-point shooting team. They shoot about 33% from 3. Seton is not going to wow you with their offense, but I mean, these two guys, they combine to shoot just a hair below 39.5% from the outside, and this team just does a great job by committee of rebounding, as you don't necessarily have that one guy other than really Stephon Payne who's been able to give you about 7.9 rebounds per game. That really steps up down low as they've dealt with a little bit of an injury to Najai Hines as well, but should be good to go. He did return in that game against Marquette, but you've got a lot of guys that they just give you like 3.5, 4 rebounds per game. They sort of chip in by committee. Elijah Fisher has been versatile with 9 points, a steal, 3.5 rebounds per game, and each out of your top 6 scorers, that includes a pain train down low, all give you at least a steal per contest for Seton. They really make life miserable for teams, and even if they don't generate a turnover, they're still relatively okay guarding the 3-point line. They've been a top 25 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Again, Seton leaving something to be desired on offense. They have been outside the top 100 with regards to points scored on a per possession basis, but I think they get the job done in a little bit of a slog, with Owen Freeman being a little bit of disappointment thus far for Creighton with only about 5 rebounds per game. So my line at 4.5, I'm going to be willing to lay it with Seton, and I'm in on the under. Sub total 134.5, 779, 780 on the card. You've got Richmond, and the itsy bitsy Spiders are on the road against Fordham. Fordham does find themselves as a bit of an underdog here. You're going to be catching with them 1.5 points. Total on this game 139.5 to 141.5, and I set a total of 134.5. I'm in on the under. Now, this is a Richmond team that's been cranking up their tempo a little bit more, about 120th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but it feels like they're getting back to those roots of being slow and controlled. Over their last 3 games, they have played at a rate of about 6 possessions per game fewer than their first 9 or 10 games of the season, and this is a Fordham team that is outside the top 335 in terms of total possessions per game, and they're doing a great job defensively. This Fordham team is 36th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, 22nd in terms of overall rebound percentage. They're also shooting 30.1% from 3. They're outside the top 315 with that regard. Offense is very much leaving something to be desired. They've been outside the top 175 in terms of ball security on offense as well, though I do like DeJour Reeves. Missed a little bit of time towards the beginning of the part of the season, but 16.5 points, 4 assists, shoots 32% from 3. Christian Henry is stepping up with 5.5 assists per contest as well, but I did make Richmond the 2.5 point favorites. I'd be willing to lay up to 2 with them, mainly because this has been a team that on the road has been a top 75 team in terms of both defensive rebound percentage, and they've been able to do a great job as well with regards to just holding teams down in general. Top 60 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis away from home, and Jane Daughtry shoots 46.5% from 3, 12 points per game. It's a whole is greater than the sum of his parts outlet for this Richmond team, as right now you've got, I believe, 10 different guys that give you at least 16 minutes per game, so they're utilizing everyone. You've got 9 guys between 5.3 and 12.1 points per game. AJ Lopez is that top scorer. You really don't have one main facilitator. Michael Walls, a center, is actually leading the way with 2.6 assists per game, but they really don't turn the ball over much either. They're a top 100 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. They've shot about 36% from 3. They leave something to be desired down low with regards to their interior defense. They're outside the top 250 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, but I do think that for this Richmond team, the way that they push things out to the outside and the way that Fordham is not canning threes, that you get a low-scoring slog of a game, and I do think that Richmond is able to hold up down low against a Fordham team that has been very good on the glass. You've been able to get about 5 rebounds per game out of both Akira Jacobs along with Abez Bajira. Hopefully I got that correct. That said, even with that, I do think that this team finds a way to persevere. I set my line at 2.5, willing to lay it with Richmond, and I'm in on the under, so my total at a 134.5. 781, 782 on the card. It is Sacred Heart. They're going to be on the road against Canisius. Canisius finds themselves as a home underdog of 2.5 points on this game, 142.5 to 143.5. So my total 142.5. Here to 143 plus. I'm in on the under. Going to have quite a bit of a tempo war as Canisius 362nd in terms of total possessions playing. Sacred Heart more of a mid-tempo team at about our 90th, and both of these teams have been leaving quite a bit of something to be desired on the defensive side of things. These are 2 teams that are outside the top 225 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but for Sacred Heart, at the very least, even though they do turn the ball over, they're able to can some threes, they're able to knock down some shots, and with this Canisius team, they are outside the top 335 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, 353rd in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. They do have Khalil Singleton, who's been able to supply 13 points per contest, but you don't have a single guy on this team that has really been able to do a supreme job of headlining things. Brian Ndanje has been able to give you about 11 points per game, but they're still searching for that go-to scorer. Singleton does shoot 42.5% from 3-point range, but he's one of just 2 of their top 7 scorers that shoots above 33.3% from 3-point range. They've been dealing with an injury to Marcus Iblack, and when he's been out there, he's been very versatile, not giving you a lot of scoring, but like 3.5 assists per contest. But with Sacred Heart, I do think that the size around the perimeter is going to be big, as you've got Deshaun Gittins, who's getting it good from 3-point range, shooting darn near near 40% for 3, 15 points, 5.5 rebounds, darn near 2 steals per contest. It is a Sacred Heart team that's outside the top 275 in terms of their ball security, but they're also keeping teams out the free throw line, a top 100 team in terms of fewest free throws allowed on a per possession basis. They're a team that's going to pop it from 3-point range a ton. Sacred Heart is taking more 3-point shots than 2-point shots, but they're about a country average team, hovering right around about 34.5% from the outside, with Jan Farrell and Niall Ralph Byer both shooting above 44% from the outside. Byer is able to give you 13.5 points per game. Farrell has been able to give you 10.5 points per contest as well. It is a Sacred Heart team that's been able to generate for themselves some second and third chances. Top 150 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage. I think that that's going to be just enough to be able to get it done against a Canisius team that just has a lot of holes both on offense and on defense. I set my line at 6.5. I'm willing to lay with Sacred Heart, and at a 143 plus, I'm going to be willing to take a shot on the under. 783, 784 on the card. Merrimack is going to be playing us to Manhattan, and Manhattan does find themselves as a underdog here of 6.5 points. 145.5 to 146.5 is the total. I'm in on the under, semi-total 145. You've got a pair of teams that have been just absolutely awful in so many aspects of things. You've got a Manhattan team that is 349th in the country with regards to rebound percentage. In terms of percentage of opponents' missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, 360th. They're allowing opponents to grab 40% of their misses as an offensive rebound. Merrimack's 365th. They are right now allowing opponents to grab 43.2% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. That goes up to 46.5% at home. Now, you've got a Merrimack team that is also slowing things down. They're outside the top 335 in terms of total possessions per game. Typically a good team in terms of generating turnovers. They've taken a step back this year. Still in the top 75, but typically they're like a top 15 team with that regard. And Manhattan is actually good at taking care of the ball. Manhattan's a relatively mid-tempo team that's in the top 150 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. And we've got a pair of guys in the backcourt, Devin Dinkins along Jaden Winston, who have been able to combine for 30.2 points per contest. Winston shoots 39% from 3-point, 2.5 steals per contest. Dinkins, he's been able to give you a little bit over a steal per contest as well. This team is getting decimated down low, but they do have Anthony Isaac, who's been able to give you about 7 rebounds per game. He should be the best rebounder in this game. And for Merrimack, I was just expecting a little bit more out of Todd Brogdon coming on over from Stone Hill. To this point, he's only been able to supply about 5.5 points, 4.5 boards to his credit. At 6'7", also does give you 2.4 assists per game. KVR Kennedy, 3.7 assists per game. He's done a nice job supplying 15 points per game. And Ernest Shelton, 15.5 points per contest as well. But Merrimack outside the top 290 with their 3-point shooting percentage. They're getting plowed on the glass. They're outside the top 325 in terms of their own 2-point shooting percentage. They're doing a nice job taking care of the ball. Merrimack, a top 55 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, but they've really reduced the way that they generate turnovers from in past years, and I think that keeps Manhattan lively in this game, and I do think that it's going to be a lower possession game. Set by total at a 145. I like the under. With Merrimack made the 3-point favorite, so taking those points with Manhattan. 785, 786 on the card. It is Florian Lanka. They're going to be on the road against Tulane, and Tulane finds themselves as a home underdog here of 4.5 points. 155.5 is the total. Set a total of a 155.5, seeing some 154.5. At 154.5, I would be willing to take a shot on the over. Now, you've got a Florian Lang team that's actually been a little bit more mid-tempo this year. They're about 119th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but they have been cranking up their tempo in recent games. Tulane has really slowed themselves down from past years, 267th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but you have a Tulane team that's just getting plowed on the glass. They're outside the top 360 in terms of their offensive rebound percentage, fewer than 7 offensive rebounds per game. They're allowing opponents to be able to grab about 32% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound, 279th in that category. And Florian Lang is not allowing second and third chances, 52nd in the country in terms of their own defensive rebound percentage. So I did set them as a 5.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 5 with Florian Lang. Now, you just never know for this Florian Lang team what you're going to get out of Cannon Carlisle. He can shoot you into a game or out of a game. He's been able to give you 14.5 points, 3.5 assists per game, but it's only shooting about 31% from the outside. But Devin Vanterpool, he's shooting 37% from 3, 17 points, 6.5 rebounds per contest. This has been a team that by committee has done a nice job in terms of giving you rebounding, while Devin Williams has been your main shot blocker with about 3 blocks, 7.5 points, 4.5 rebounds per game. Also shoots about 40% from 3. Now, Florian Lang, they give it up from 3-point range. They are outside the top 250 once again in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, but a Tulane team that should be making their bones on being able to knock down threes. Right now, they're shooting about 30.7% from 3. That's hovering right around 300th in the country. Tulane has been a top 30 team in terms of free throws attempted on a per possession basis, but they too are outside the top 300 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Rowan Bumba, nice go-to scorer, 18.5 points, 5 boards, 3.5 assists, shoots 38% from 3-point range. Only out of their top 4 scorers that shoots above 30.3% from 3-point range. Asher Woods does give you 12 points, about a steal and a half per contest, but I mean, this is also a team that's outside the top 175 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Country average team in terms of guarding things down low. I do think that Florida Atlantic going to be able to grab those boards and take advantage of a Tulane team that's really not guarding the arc. This is not going to be a super up-tempo game, but I do think that the offensive efficiency gets you that over. Semi-total 155.5, so 155 or less. And on the over end, willing to lay up to 5 with Florida Atlantic. 787, 788 on the card. It is UAB. They're going to be on the road against South Florida. South Florida, a favorite of 6.5 points, 163.5 is the total. And for UAB, I saw them as a 2.5 point underdog. I'm going to be willing to take those points. With UAB, this has been a pretty sturdy team in terms of doing the little things. They're 23rd in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Teams are only grabbing about 23.1% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. And boy, this UAB team is bad from 3-point range. They're shooting less than 30.5% as a collective. That's a bottom 30 mark in all of college basketball, but 6th in the country in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. And they are not going to try to be something that they're not. They are outside the top 300 in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 3-point range, so they're looking to pile drive the ball down low. You do have a South Florida team that they themselves about 69th, very nice in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, so they're taking good care of the ball. And this is a South Florida team that has also been nice on the glass, as you got Isaiah Nelson. He followed Brian Hodgson on over from Arkansas State, and he's been their main man, 15.5 points, 9.8 rebounds per game in terms of 3-point shooting. Joseph Pignon, who also came over from Arkansas State, 2.2 steals, 14.5 points, shoots 39% from 3-point range, but I expected this team to shoot a little bit better than 32.5% from the outside. South Florida has been very good at getting to the free throw line. Top 15 team in terms of free throw attempts on a per possession basis. Top 25 team in terms of their offensive rebound percentage as well. So they're grabbing a lot of second and third chances, but they're also not doing a good job of being able to guard the 3-point line. They're outside the top 275 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Now they are a top 40 team in terms of generating turnovers. So you sort of have strength on weakness on really both aspects of things. And you do have a pair of teams that they are not afraid to push a little bit of tempo, especially South Florida. They're 6th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. UAB has slowed it down from past years. They're more mid-tempo at about 157th in terms of total possessions per game, but I do think that this UAB team holds in there with Chance Westery being able to supply 15 points. He's not a great 3-point shooter, and as a matter of fact, you've got 2 guys on the roster that shoot above 33.3% from 3-point range, and one of the guys that shoots 33.3%, Daniel Rivera, is attempting 0.2 threes per game, so that's not great, but Salim London has been able to give you 5 points on about 38% 3-point shooting. Ahmad Robinson, Sachi Suffer, that comes over from Mercer, 12.5 points, 4 assists. He's been able to shoot about 35.5% from 3, and with this UAB team, not allowing a lot of second and third chances, being a top 125 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, I do think that they find a way to hold in this game that I think is going to be very much up and down. Set by total 166.5. I like the over and the points here with UAB. 789, 790 on the card. Denver is going to be on the road against St. Thomas. St. Thomas is a favorite of 10 to 10.5 points, 161 to 161.5 is the total. Denver has yet to play an under thus far this season. I think that the trend continues. I set my total at 164. I'm in on the over. Denver, a mid-tempo team. They're about 182nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. St. Thomas 175th, so they're both right there. But I mean, both of these teams are doing a nice job in terms of valuing their possessions. St. Thomas 23rd in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. Denver 89th. Now, I will say this about St. Thomas. They are going to give themselves 0 second chances in terms of the offensive rebounds, as this is a team that right now is 365th in terms of offensive rebound percentage. 15.7% of their misses become an offensive rebound, but I think that they are going to start lighting it up from 3-point range, as it's a good old situation of something's got to give. You've got a Denver team that has line team to shoot 40% from 3-point range. It's a bottom 3 mark in all of college basketball. And St. Thomas, who typically is a really good 3-point shooting team, only shooting about 33.4% from the outside. So I do think that we are going to see a little bit of a reversal there. And for this St. Thomas team, Noah Mansell has been able to give you 22.3 points, 4 assists, 4.5 boards. He's only shooting about 30% from 3. I think that rises. Their top 3-point shooter has actually been Parker Bezjerke. Bezjerke gives you 9.5 points. He shoots 38.5% from 3 points. But Nick Jankowski, 14.5 points, 5 rebounds per game. And for the St. Thomas team, they're going to not give up a ton of second and third chances. They actually have been a top 125 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. So while they don't generate a lot of second and third chances, they don't allow you to get those second and third chances. And for Denver, they just don't push any sort of of, shall we say, pressure on defense. They are well outside the top 3 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but a team that's a flamethrower from 3-point range. They're shooting 38.5% from 3-point range. That's a top 35 mark in all of college basketball. As each of your top 4 scorers shoot at least 39.1% from the outside. Carson Johnson has been that main man, 18 points per game, 42.5% 3-point shooter, 86% free throw shooter, and each out of their top 6 scorers also shoot at least 76.2% at the free throw line. You've got sort of facilitation by committee with Zane Nelson, 2.2 assists per contest, Johnson, 2.6 assists per game, and then Jeremiah Burke off the ball as a wing, 15.5 points. He knocks down about 39% of his threes, but I do think that this bad 3-point shooting defense of Denver is going to be exploited. They're also really rough inside, outside the top 3 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and I do think that St. Thomas gets the job done in a game where you might not get a ton of possessions, but you're going to get good efficiency. I set my line at a 164 with the total and on the over, and I'm willing to take the points here with Denver. I did set them as a 10.5 point dog, as I do think that the lack of second and third chances for St. Thomas going to doom them from being able to cover quite this big of a number. 791, 782 on the card. Middle Tennessee plays us the Sam Houston. Sam I am Houston is a underdog here of 4.5 to 5.5 points. 156.5 to 157.5 is the total. Set a total of 153.5. I'm in on the under. Now you are going to have a little bit of a tempo war here. You've got a Middle Tennessee team that is a relatively mid-tempo team, and Sam Houston is really looking to crank up that tempo. They are currently 32nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Sam Houston doing a good job in terms of generating second and third chances. They are currently 39th in the country in terms of percentage of their missed shots that become an offensive rebound. This has been a Middle Tennessee team, though, that is sensational on being able to guard the 3-point line. They are 17th in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, with teams shooting 28.7% overall. At home, that goes down to 26.4%, so that's a little bit of an issue. But with Sam Houston State, I'm going to be willing to take the points because I do like the way that they just spread the wealth. You right now have 8 different players averaging between 8.2 and 13 points per game. Isaiah Manning is a top scorer with 13 points per game. He shoots 38.5% from 3-point range, and this is a Sam Houston State team that they overall do shoot 34.9% from 3. They take a good amount of threes, but they still try to pile drive the ball down low. But with being able to get those second and third chances, I think that that'll be big in terms of keeping them alive. And for the Sam Houston State team, they themselves are a really good team at being able to guard the 3-point line. As for Sam Houston State, their line teams who shoot about 31.2% from the outside. That's a top 80 mark in all of college basketball. And for Middle Tennessee, this is not quite the same team in terms of generating turnovers that they have been in past years. For Middle Tennessee, they're going to be looking to Kamari Lands to really be able to be their main guy. He's been able to supply 12.5 points, 4.5 boards. He shoots 35% per 3, and team as a whole shoots 35% from the outside, but this team is out outside the top 175 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. To have Torrey Olson, who's able to give you a block and a half, 8 rebounds, 11.5 points per contest, and then you only have one other guy, Chris Lufay, who's been able to give you over 4.5 rebounds per game. He's up to 5.5 boards per contest, but I do think that Sam Houston State, with having so many different guys being able to contribute, with having a bunch in Middle Tennessee that also just does not get to the free throw line. They're outside the top 330 in terms of free throw attempts on a per possession basis. That's going to help Sam Houston State hold in this game, and I do think that's going to be a little bit lower scoring as a result as well, with both of these teams guard the arc so well. So did set my total 153.5. I like the under, and with Sam Houston State, we'll take 4+ with them. 783, 784 on the card. Iona is going to be on the road against Marist. Marist has found themselves as a mid-tier favorite here of 4.5 points. 143.5 is the total, and I set a total of 144. I do like the over. You've got a Marist team that's sped up a little bit from past years. Not necessarily a warp speed team or anything like that, but about 258th in terms of total possessions per game. Iona has certainly sped things up there. 40th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And Iona, to start the year, was a really good 3-point shooting defense. It tapered off a little bit, but they're still about 59th in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. And Marist has been very good at guarding the arc. 13th in the country in opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. That goes down to about 25.2% at home. But I do think that there's going to be a little bit of regression there, and you do have an Iona team that one of their main kryptonites has been on the glass. They give up a lot of second and third chances. They are right around about 187th in the country in terms of percentage of missed shots that result in an offensive rebound for opponents. Meanwhile, you've got a Marist team that year in and year out has been really good with regards to their interior defense. They've taken a little bit of a setback from last few years, mainly because last few years they were a top 10 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. That's more around 26th this year, so it's not like it's a big setback. But for Iona, they are a team that I think is going to be able to feature a lot of CJ Anthony to be able to hold in there. He has been very versatile coming on over from Cincinnati, as he supplies 15.5 points, 6 assists, does turn the ball for 2.5 times per game, and it's just an Iona group that is either here nor there in terms of generating turnovers, but they've been able to get really good production out of their ancillary guys like Toby Harris, who shoots 44% from 3, 13.5 points per game. Lamine Sabali has been your main low post presence with about 8 rebounds. He contributes about 2 steals per contest as well. And for this Marist group, I am willing to lay with them mainly because even though they are so rock solid with regards to their defense, they also do a nice job in terms of doling out the ball. As you've had Justin Menard in the backcourt do a good job of giving out about 4 assists, close to about 10.5 points per contest. Elijah Lewis, 13.5 points, 4.5 rebounds. It's a team that does a great job of rebounding by committee, with Jaden Daughtry being the lone guy that gives you over 5 rebounds per game. He's up to 5.8 boards, 5.5 points per game. And for Marist, they only shoot about 32% from 3-point range, but this is also a group that has been able to do a little bit of a better job in terms of taking care of the ball. They've also become a top 100 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but I do think that they're going to find some cracks in an Iona defense that has been allowing a little bit more from 3-point range than they did to begin the season. They're allowing quite a few second and third chances. I do think that Rajon Blackwell being able to give you 12.5 points per game, and in a tight spot, this is a Marist team that they shoot 77.7% at the free throw line. That's a top 20 mark in all of college basketball. I do think that that's enough to win out. So 143.5 or less in on the over, and I'm willing to lay with Marist. I did set them as a favorite of 6 points, 795, 796 on the card. It is Fairfield, and they are going to be on the road against Niagara. Niagara is a home underdog of 3.5 to 4.5 points, 139.5 is the total. And for Fairfield, I set them as a 10-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. This is a Niagara team that is just rough. They are one of the slowest teams that you're going to find in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game. They check in more around about 348th, and they're also outside the top 330 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. You got a Fairfield team that has relatively mid-tempo, 221st in terms of total possessions per game, and Fairfield is just doing a really nice job in terms of giving themselves second and third chances in terms of percentage of their own missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. Fairfield is ranking in the top 75 in all of college basketball, and if you look at just road numbers only, they're 28th in this regard. Niagara, meanwhile, they are grabbing 13.8% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound at home. Bottom 5 mark in all of college basketball. That's not great, to say the least. And for Niagara, this is a team that's supposed to have a forte of 3-point shooting, but they just don't have much 3-point shooting. They only returned really one guy from a season ago. That would be Justin Page, your top scorer with 11.8 points per game. Lone guy on the roster that gives you double figures. You don't have a single guy on the team that gives you over 4 rebounds per game. Josiah Sabino has been giving you 4 rebounds per game. He headlines things there. This is also a team that has been pretty ghastly with their defense. They're outside the top 350 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, outside the top 290 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They themselves shoot 30.1% from 3. They're outside the top 275 in terms of their own 2-point shooting percentage. Like, someone named to me something that Niagara's doing right, because it's really not much of anything. Meanwhile, for this Fairfield team, you do have Braden Sparks in the backcourt, who's been able to do a solid job being able to supply for the team 18 points, 2.5 assists, shoots 44.5% from 3. Fairfield, neither here nor there, shooting about 34.2% from 3-point range, but they grab those second chances and they do a good job taking care of the ball. They're a top 55 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. That helps offset the fact that they're outside the top 300 with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage, but on defense, top 175 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They can be hurt from 3. They're outside the top 240 with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, but again, Niagara's just not knocking down their shots, and they're playing super slow, and they're not getting any second chances to score as well. Semi-total at a 134. I'm in on the under, and with Fairfield, I'm willing to lay up to 9.5 with them, set them as a 10-point favorite. 797, 798 on the card. It is Marquette, and they are going to be on the road facing off against UConn, and UConn is a 20.5-point favorite. 145.5 is the total, and with UConn, set them as a 19.5 point favorite. So 20 does become my buy point on Marquette, and boy, is this a disappointment of a Marquette team. As of right now, they are shooting about 30.4% from 3, outside the top 300 nationally. They actually have not been bad in terms of grabbing offensive rebounds, top 100 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, but they're still outside the top 200 with regards to overall rebound percentage, as Ben Gold is the only guy that gives you over 5 rebounds per game, 6.5 boards, 9 points per contest, and Chase Ross just needs help. 16.5 points, 4 boards, 3.5 assists, 2 steals per contest. Marquette's still a top 70 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but they're getting just blasted with regards to opponents being able to go bombs away from 3 outside the top 240 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Now they've got Zayd Lowry, who is averaging 8 points per game, leaving the program, so that's not great. And for this Connecticut team, this is a team that's going to be built a little bit more around their defense rather than their offense, and UConn, just one of the most sturdy teams that you're going to find on the glass. As for UConn, they're currently a top 25 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, so they don't allow you too many open looks on the inside. If you take a look at their overall rebound percentage, this is even with Terrace Reed being out for a few games. They're a top 40 team with that regard. And Mr. Reed, who I mentioned before, he missed a few games, but he's back and giving you 14 points, 7.5 rebounds per game. Alex Caravan, 14 points, 5.5 rebounds. He's right now shooting 45% from three. It's a UConn team as a whole. They're about 100th with their 35.5% three-point shooting percentage, but they do not allow open looks from three at all. Top 10 team and opponent's three-point shooting percentage at 26%. Have a UConn team that as well has had solo ball really be able to step up 15.5 points per contest. Only shooting for the year 30% from three, but feels like he's starting to find his three-point shooting swagger. I know that they've dealt with a few injuries as well to Braylon Mullins as well, but Silas Emery, 6 assists, 4.5 rebounds, 8.5 points per game. This UConn team is a top 125 team in terms of taking care of the ball themselves. Not going to force a ton of turnovers, but okay at generating turnovers. I think that UConn goes out there and is able to win this game rather handily, but again, I do think that once you get to 20 plus, it does get to be a little bit too far, especially with UConn being a lower tempo team, 275th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Marquette a little bit more up tempo as for this Marquette bunch right now. They're checking in about 62nd in terms of total possessions per game. Set a total of a 143.5, so 144 plus in on the under, and we'll take 20 plus here with Marquette. 799, 800 on the card. It is Delaware, and they play us to Kennesaw St. We give our road to Lane Kiffin go Owls as Kennesaw St. 6.5 point road favorites. Total on scheme 151.5. Did set a total of a 156. I do like the over. You have a Kennesaw St team that has been pretty good in terms of guarding the three-point arc, and they don't really shoot it well from three themselves. They are outside the top 250 in terms of overall three-point shooting percentage. Very good rebounding team, though. This Kennesaw St team, 41st in the country in terms of overall rebound percentage, and you've got a Delaware team that is right now just getting blasted on the glass outside the top 275 in terms of overall rebound percentage, and much of that is because they're just not grabbing any sort of second and third chances for themselves. This Delaware team is currently outside the top 350 in terms of offensive rebound percentage. They're outside the top 225 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis at home because they just keep turning the ball over. They're outside the top 290 in terms of ball security with over 13 turnovers per game. Now, Christian Bliss along Justin Fernandez have been a nice 1-2 punch. They both give you between 14.5 and 15 points per game, and Fernandez shoots 45% for three. Bliss has been able to shoot 38% from the outside, and for Delaware, they've been able to be a relatively solid defense. They're a top 225 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Their main issue has been outside shooting. They're allowing teams to shoot about 34% from three. That's outside the top 225 in all of college basketball, but for Kennesaw St, I do think that they go out there and they absolutely own the painted area in this one. I did set them as a 6-point favorite, though, mainly because Kennesaw St has had a few turnover issues of their own. They're outside the top 230 in terms of their own ball security, and for Kennesaw St, they're up to shooting about 33 to 34% from three. It depends upon if you factor in non-D1 games or not. Simeon Cottle, 42.5% three-point shooter, 19.5 points per contest. Ramon Seals, 10.5 points. He's able to shoot about 35% for three. RJ Johnson shoots about 43% from the outside, but you do have a bunch as well that has been just a little bit suspect in terms of the way that they give up some open looks from three. They've been outside the top 150 in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage. So I do think that Delaware does a okay job in terms of holding in this game there, and I do think that you're going to be able to get a ton of scoring because Kennesaw State, number one in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Delaware has really sold themselves down there. We're currently 333rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. I think that that might be a little bit of a byproduct of the competition that they're playing against, but I do think that Delaware, with having Fernandez back in the fold after he dealt with an injury, is going to be just enough for them to be able to hold in this game. So this is a circumstance where I did sub out line at 6.5 plus, going to be willing to take those points with Delaware, and I do like the over at a 151.5. I sub I total at a 156. 801, 802 on the card is Jacksonville St, and they are going to be on the road facing off against Liberty, and Liberty finds themselves as a 10.5 point favorite. 134 to 134.5 is the total, and I said Liberty as a 12.5 point favorite. I'm going to be one to lay the number for Liberty. This is one of the slowest teams that you're going to find in all of college basketball. In terms of total possessions per game, they check in at a nice hearty 308th, and Jacksonville State is even slower at 347th, and that is a big reason why I'm going to be in on the under. Now for Jacksonville State, the big key for them is going to be guarding the three-point line, as you've got a Liberty team that's not going to grab for themselves any sort of second and third chances. They're a bottom 5 team in the country in terms of percentage of their missed shots that become an offensive rebound, but you've got a Liberty team that overall shoots 39.1% from three. That goes up 47.2% at home, which we're going to see a little bit of regression there. I recognize that Brett Decker is good. He's giving you over 15 points per game. He's shooting 50+% from three, but that should fall off a little bit. Jacksonville State country average at about 33.5% from the outside, but that does fall to about 30% in a road/neutral court venue. And for Jacksonville, they're a little bit stronger on the inside, but they're still okay at being able to guard the arc. They're about 129th. 32.3% is what opponents shoot from three, but that does ascend to about 36 36.7% when they're away from home. And it's a Liberty team that they allow teams to only shoot about 31% from three-point range at home. And for Liberty, what I think is going to be an X factor for them, the versatility that they've got out of Zach Cleveland. He's a 6'7" point forward, 10.5 points, 8.8 rebounds, 7.5 assists per contest. I love his game. And then Caden Matheny has been really good in the backcourt, as he's right now supplying 14 points, 3.5 assists. He shoots 38% from three. Colin Porter shoots over 40% from the outside. Flip side, you've got a Jacksonville St team that has been able to find those two go-to scorers. AC Bryan, about 13.5 points, 4.5 boards. He's more of that backcourt leader, shooting 40% from three. And Mustafa El Montequil, 18.5 points, 7.5 boards. He only shoots about 32% from three, but does a good job down low for a Jacksonville St team that has been one of your better rebounding teams in all of college basketball. They're back in the top 100 with regards to their overall rebounding percentage, and they've been a top 100 team in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage, so I do think that keeps them lively. But Jacksonville State also outside the top 250 with their own two-point shooting percentage, while you do have a Liberty team that is not necessarily the most efficient with regards to their overall rebounding or anything like that. They are doing a nice job in terms of being a top 150 team in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage, and they themselves are a top 5 team. And with regards to their own two-point shooting percentage, I think that you get a very slowed down game, a very controlled game, and Liberty should see a little bit of regression with that three-point shooting, but even with that regression, I think that they get the job done. So by total 132.5, I like the under, and I'm willing to lay up to 12 with Old Liberty. 803, 804 on the card. Wright St is on the road against IU Indy. IU Indy does find themselves as a 9.5 point home underdog. 163.5 is the total. Did set a total of 168.5. I do like the over. Now for IU Indy, they're starting to play a little bit more slowly. They have lost the number 1 spot in terms of total possessions per game. They're down to number 4, and if you look at their last 5 games, they've been playing at a rate of about 6.5 to 7 possessions per game fewer than they did to begin this season. This is still a team that's looking to create a lot of havoc. IU Indy, top 100 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and for IU Indy, they're very much going to be looking to go bounds away from three. A top 50 team in terms of percent of their shots that come from three, with Kyler D'Agostino leading things, 38.5% three-point shooter, 17 points per game. This team is just going to get absolutely plowed on the glass. You've only got one guy on the roster with over 4.2 rebounds per game, despite the fact that they play as fast as they do. Finley Woodyard, who gives you about 8.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. It's an IU Indy team that's frankly outside the top 350 in terms of their rebound percentage, and with Wright St, this team is going to be able to own things down low, as they've been able to get great production with about 6 boards, 11.5 points per game out of Michael Barrage. And then you've got Michael Cooper, who in the backcourt as a freshman has really been able to ascend 15.5 points. He shoots 37.5% from the outside. And this has been a Wright St team that's been very good in terms of guarding the three-point line. Opponents are only shooting in that neighborhood about 30.5% from three-point range against them. They're a top 100 team in all of college basketball. Now, they do allow opponents to shoot 37% from three-point range at home compared to 28% away from home. I do think that divide is going to be seeing a little bit of, shall we say, in ironing out. But IU Indy at home, they allow opponents to shoot over 36% from three. That should allow Wright St to be able to get some good opportunities. I am going to be willing to take the points because you do have a Wright St team that has had a few issues with regards to their own turnovers, but they themselves have been a top 125 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. And if you do get into late game fouling, and IU Indy is a team that will foul you, this Wright St team only shoots about 68.2% of the free throw line. That's outside the top 270 nationally. So I did set a line of 8.5. At a 9+, I'm going to be willing to take the points with IU Indy, and I do like the over. I set my total at a 168.5. 805, 806 on the card. It is Ryder, and they play us to Siena. Siena is a 10.5 point road favorite. 134.5 to 135.5 is the total. Set a total of a 128. I'm going to be in on the under. Both of these teams are playing at a ridiculously slow pace. Ryder 317th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Siena 338th, and these are not teams that are lighting it up from three-point range, but Siena has been very good with their defense, and that's a big reason why I set them as a 12-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. This Siena team is a top 70 team with regards to opponents' three-point shooting percentage. Now, their own three-point shooting percentage is 340th, but misery has company, as Siena shoots 28.2% from three-point range. Ryder, 25.7% from three-point range. That is 364th out of 365 Division I teams. Ryder, a bottom 10 team in all of college basketball in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and you think, oh, they just don't shoot the three well. No, Ryder's 364th in their two-point shooting percentage as well. You've got a pair of guys in the backcourt that have been able to give you about 10 to 11 points per game, as Flash Burton, one of the better names that you're going to find in all of college basketball, has done an okay job with Zion Cruz. But outside of that, you have no scoring. You've only got really two guys on the roster that rebound, as well as you've had Caleb Smith, Shamari Fuller be able to combine for about 13 rebounds per game. Nobody else gives you over 3.6 rebounds per game. This is a Ryder team that is well outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, as they're just losing the turnover battle battle outside the top 320 in terms of their just ability to be able to take care of the ball, outside the top 330 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. So Siena, they're going to be able to get clean possessions. And Siena's been a top 125 team in terms of ball security. They're just not knocking down shots. Gavin Doty, though, 16 points per contest. He shoots 32.5% from three-point range. Justin Schoss in the backcourt, 5 assists, so about 2.8 turnovers per game, 11.5 points per game. With Siena, they are a little bit vulnerable down low as they're outside the top 240 in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage, but they're also doing a really good job in terms of not allowing a lot of second and third chances as well. In terms of defensive rebound percentage, you've got a Siena bunch that is currently 67th in all of college basketball. Teams are only grabbing about 25% of their misses as an offensive rebound. They've sort of been doing it by committee, though. You've had Doty really be the headline guy. You've had Tisman Guderick dealing with a little bit of an injury. He was their top rebounder, but Antonio Chandler, with his 5.5 rebounds per game, has stepped up, and I think that Siena gets it done in a slug of a game. Semi-total at 128. I'm in on the under, and I'm going to lay up to 11.5 here with Siena. 807, 808 on the card. Mount St. Mary's is going to be on the road against Quinnipiac, and Quinnipiac is a double-figure favorite here of 10.5 points. So on scheme, 149.5, and with Quinnipiac, I set them as a 13.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number with the Bobcats. It's a very balanced team in comparison to a season ago. As Quinnipiac, much better with regards to their three-point shooting percentage this year. They're a top 110 team, shooting about 35.8% for three, with Jaden Zimmerman being their main scorer. Now, Zimmerman has been dealing with quite a bit of injury recently. We have not seen him in about a month, and I do think that he's going to be out once again here. But Amari Monroe, who was a little bit disappointing to begin the year, he's picking up the slack, 15 points, 3 steals, 5.5 rebounds per game. And then in the backcourt, Asim Jones is right now shooting 58.5% for three. That'll see a bit of regression with 11.5 points per contest. Samson Riley, 52.5% three-point shooter, again doing for regression, but 7 points per game. He's done a nice job while Zimmerman has been out of the fold, and you've been able to get quite a bit down low out of Keith. Give me just one more McKnight, a good freshman who's been able to give you 11.5 points, 5 rebounds, great versatility out of him. This is a Quinnipiac team that is also a top 150 team in terms of both opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage, while being a team that has been a top 150 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. And for this Mount St. Mary's team, this is a squad that actually does a relatively okay job on the glass. They've been a top 100 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Here's what is absolutely killing them, though: turnovers, and it's on both sides of it. As for this Mount St. Mary's team, they rank 365th out of 365 teams in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. They turn the ball over on 25.1% of their possessions when they're away from them, and they don't generate any in return. This team is about 285th in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis overall, so yeah, that's not great to say the least. Now, I will say this for Mount St. Mary's: when they actually get a clean possession, they're not the world's worst shooting team, as they've been able to get good production out of Trey Devieux, who's been able to give you about 12 points per contest. Now, the team shoots about 32% for three, a bit below country average there, but Xavier Lipscomb, nice head sheet stuff for 10 points, 5 boards, 4 assists, 2.5 per contest. Orlando Skis has been able to shoot about 34% from three-point range, but I think that the turnovers are just going to be way too much for this Mount St. Mary's team to be able to overcome. They're also outside the top 200 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, so set a line of 13.5. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Maybe my total 147.5. I think that the turnovers also cost you an over, so in on the under and willing to lay it with Quinnipiac. 809, 810 on the card. It is Fort Wayne playing host to Cleveland St. Cleveland St is an underdog of 8.5 points. 157.5 is the total, and with Fort Wayne, I did set them as a favorite of 14.5 points, so I'm going to be willing to lay the number. This is a Cleveland State team that they are just not great with regards to the turnover battle, as they are not generating any whatsoever in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. This Cleveland State team is right now checking in outside the top 300 in all of college basketball, so that's very much less than savory. And for this Cleveland State team, they themselves have had a little bit of a tough time taking care of the ball. One good thing about Cleveland State is that they've been able to pop it relatively well from three-point range. As a collective, they're shooting 37.5% from three, top 75 mark in all of college basketball. Trey Beard being that main man, shooting 47.5% from three, 14 points per contest. You've got Dan Nasai, who's been able to supply 14 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. And for Cleveland State, they do grab for themselves a few second and third chances, but they are absolutely giving up way too many second and third chances as well. For Cleveland State, they're allowing opponents to grab 37.1% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound in a road/neutral court venue. That is 39.1%, and you do have a Purdue Fort Wayne team that they themselves have not been great with regards to their defensive rebound percentage. They're allowing teams to grab about 35.5% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound, so they're 328th in all of college basketball. So I do think that as a result, you're going to be able to get some nice scoring opportunities here. I did set my total at a 162.5. I'm going to be in on the over. You have a Fort Wayne team that's fast, but not like warp speed fast. They're about 150th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Cleveland State is very much looking to crank up that tempo at about 57th, but for Fort Wayne, even though they don't necessarily have a ton down low, Max Vincelson just has not been able to develop the way that the team was hoping for. You've got Corey Hadnot, who's a nice go-to scorer, 20.5 points, a little bit over 4 board shooting, 37.5% from three, and DeAndre 3000 Craig, who comes in from Denver, 14.5 points on 36.5% three-point shooting. And with regards to Darius Duffy, he's been able to give you 4.5 boards, 5.5 points, so he's been able to help out there. It's a little bit of a top-heavy team, but for Fort Wayne, they do a great job winning the turnover battle. Top 75 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, top 75 team in terms of taking care of the ball, and I do think that the second and third chances help you out with the overhand with this Cleveland State team just getting dump trucked on the glass. I do think that Fort Wayne gets the job done. Fort Wayne is a 14.5 point favorite. I'm willing to lay it, and I'm going to be in on the over, so my total at 162.5. 8-11, 8-12 on the card. It is New Mexico State on the road against Missouri State, and Missouri State does find themselves as a 1.5 point home underdog. 136.5 is the total, set a total of a 131, so I'm going to be in on the under. You had a pair of teams that are not looking to push a lot of tempo. New Mexico State, they're about 251st in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Missouri State, they are far slower, 336th in the country, and for Missouri State, they become a top 125 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. Absolutely awful with their three-point shooting right now. This Missouri State team shoots 29.2% from the outside. That is a bottom 25 mark in all of college basketball. You've had Kobe Williams shoot about 34% from three with 12.5 points per game. Trey Williams, he shoots 34% from three, but guys with the last name that isn't Williams that is attempting at least 1 3 per game, every single one of them shooting less than 28.6% from three. Not great. You do have Keith Pollock, they'll give you about 17.5 points, 7 boards per contest, and this has been a Missouri State team that has been respectable on the glass. Top 175 team in terms of rebound percentage. They become a top 150 team in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage, but that said, for New Mexico State, I do think that they are going to be able to dominate this game down low. I did set them as a 7-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number, and the meep road runner in Jamal Jones has come in to be able to give the team 15 points, 4.5 boards. He only shoots 34% for the New Mexico State. As a collective, they shoot 32.5% from the outside, but this has been a top 50 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, top 75 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and this team has been very good in terms of generating turnovers as well. New Mexico State is generating about 14.5 turnovers per game. If you look at things on a per possession basis, New Mexico State has been a top 150 team in a road/neutral venue with that regard, and for New Mexico State, even though you might not have that one guy that's going to just be supreme on the glass right now, Julius Mims is the lone guy that gives you over 4.5 rebounds per game. They just do a great job by committee of giving themselves second and third chances. A top 175 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage, a top 100 team in terms of overall rebound percentage, and I do think that that wins out against a Missouri State team that does have Michael Bonusu, who's been able to give you about 7 rebounds per game, but it's a little bit undersized at 6'4", and Jackson King, who returns from his season ago, only about 10 points. Last year shot about 38.5% for three, down to 23% this year. So, circumstance where I did some New Mexico State as a 7-point favorite, I'm going to be willing to lay the number, and like the under, set my total at a 131, 8-13, 8-14 on the card. Western Kentucky is going to be playing us at Louisiana Tech, and Louisiana Tech finds themselves as an underdog of 7.5 to 8.5 points. 142.5 to 143.5 is the total, and I said Western Kentucky as an 11-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Louisiana Tech outside the top 330 in terms of total possessions per game. Western Kentucky is the exact opposite, as for Western Kentucky right now, a nice hearty 17th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And with Western Kentucky, I did set them as the 11-point favorite, mainly because for Louisiana Tech, even though this has been a really good team on defense, and for Louisiana Tech, right now they're one of the best teams at being able to guard the three-point line. As teams, if you involve non-Division I games, they allow them to shoot 27.7% from three-point against D1 teams alone. They're a top 35 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. They're strong there, but that said, this is also a team that they themselves are only shooting about 30% for three outside the top 325 in all of college basketball. Even with DJ Dudley, give you 12 points on 39.5% three-point shooting, and AJ Bates, 40% three-point shooter that supplies 11.5 points, 6 assists per game. These two guys just don't have a lot of help around the outside. You do have Scooter Williams, Caden Cooper, giving about 20.5 points per contest, but these are the lone two guys on the roster that shoot above 30.5% from three-point range. And for Louisiana Tech, this is a very rock-solid team with regards to their rebounding. They're a top 100 team in terms of overall rebound percentage, but I do like the way that this Western Kentucky team just has a knack for being able to win the turnover battle, and Western Kentucky has been able to do a really good job in terms of grabbing second and third chances as well. This Western Kentucky team is currently a top 150 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. That should put a Louisiana Tech team that's had a little bit of a tough time holding on to the ball under duress, and for Western Kentucky, they're a top 125 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. That goes up to the top 110 when they are at home, as they've been able to have Tegan Moore give them more. He's done it all with about 18 points, 6 boards, a steal, 2.5 assists per contest, and then Terry Mardu, he's dealt with a little bit of injury when he's been out there. He's been able to give you about 3.5 assists per contest. I'm expecting him to be out of the full, but in his, shall we say, absence, you've been able to get quite a bit more out of Armello Boone, who's been able to step up as a little bit more of a starter with about 12.5 points, 6 boards. He doles out a little bit over 2 assists per game. And then Brian Sabongwe, who's been able to give you about 7.7 rebounds per game. He's dealt with a little bit of ailment as well, probably going to be out once again. So I did have to factor those injuries in for Western Kentucky. But in their absence, Cameron Hafner, who he comes over from Evansville, has only been able to give you about 6.5 points per game. He's been able to ignite a little bit of life, shooting about 39% from 3-point range and at 6+ points in 4 out of the last 5 games. So he's been able to step up for this team. And I do think that with Western Kentucky, they're going to continue to crank up the tempo. They've been a little bit suspect with their 2-point shooting, but they do a nice job giving themselves second and third chances. And I do think that flat out for Louisiana Tech, they're going to be a little bit sloppy with the ball. Western Kentucky probably going to need to slow down just a little bit with all those ailments. So did somebody total at a 139. I'm in on the under. And with Western Kentucky, I'm going to be willing to lay up to 10.5 with them. 8-15, 8-16 on the card. Robert Morris is on the road against Oakland. Oakland finds themselves as a pretty good size favorite here. You're going to be laying with them 4.5 to 5 points. So on this game, 159.5 to 160.5. And I did set a total of 156.5. I do like the under as Robert Morris has been playing at a pretty slow pace this season, about 284th in terms of total possessions per game. Oakland is cranking it up. Oakland, in terms of total possessions per game, they're 79th in the country. And you find this every year with Oakland, and it never makes any sense. They always give up fewer points per possession when they're away from home rather than at home. I just don't know how it happens every single year, but it's an Oakland team that's pretty ghastly with regards to their defense. They're 38th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but actually giving up 2.7 points more per 100 possessions at home rather than away from home. Meanwhile, you've got a Robert Morris team that is somewhat respectable on defense, about 234th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And the big thing for Robert Morris is that they are going to have a leg up on the glass. This Oakland team has been outside the top 250 in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. Robert Morris is grabbing 38.4% of their misses as an offensive rebound, and they need to because they have been turning the ball over a little bit too much. They're outside the top 260 in terms of ball security. They're turning the ball over 13 times per game, but down low you've had Nikilis Chadakoulis along Deshaun Good do a nice job combining for about 16.5 rebounds per game. Chadakoulis about 12 points per game, and Good is right now shooting 68% from 3-point range. We're going to see some regression there. Robert Morris as a whole, they shoot 34.7% from the outside, and for Robert Morris, about a country average team in terms of guarding the arc at 33.3%, and that's big against an Oakland team that has been pretty good at being able to light it up from 3-point range, and this has been an Oakland team that's been able to do a nice job in terms of taking care of the ball as well. They only turn the ball over about 10.5 times per game, a top 65 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis with Brody Robinson, who comes over from UT Arlington, doing a nice job of leading the charge, 16 points, 6 assists. He shoots 40% from 3, and then you've been able to have Zaire Wells shoot 40% from 3 with 9.5 points per game. Bori Navarura, about 5.5 boards, just under a block, but does generate a steal with his 13.5 points per game. It's an Oakland team that actually has quite a bit of balance in terms of their offense because while they shoot 36% from 3, they're actually a top 75 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 2-point range, and for Oakland, this has been a squad that has been giving up quite a few second and third chances, but I do think that this game is going to be slowed down a little bit by Robert Morris, and I do think that Robert Morris is going to be costed by the fact that they have been very sloppy with the ball. So I total 156.5. I'm in on the under, and I'm willing to lay up to 8 with Oakland. 8-17, 8-18 on the card. It is Tulsa, and they're going to be on the road against North Texas. North Texas is a home underdog here of 4.5 points. 138.5 to 139.5 is the total, and I said Tulsa is an 8-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay this number. Now, for North Texas, they have been a whole heck of a lot better with regards to their offense when they've been at home rather than away from home, but still, they're outside the top 225 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They do give themselves second chances, top 125 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage, but you've got a Tulsa team that has been an absolute freight train with regards to their offense. It's a Tulsa team that is either here nor there in terms of grabbing second and third chances, but they've actually been able to do a good job in terms of not allowing teams to be able to grab a lot of offensive rebounds. Top 85 team with regards to their defensive rebound percentages. We always talk about the great guards of Tulsa, and rightfully so. Miles Barnstable has been supplying 13.5 points per game from 3-point. He shoots 44% from 3. Tylen Riley continues to shoot 50% from 3, 14.5 points, 3.5 assists per contest. David Green, after he was a 40+% 3-point shooter at Rhode Island, still 33% for the year, but he's heating up with 14 points per game. But those ancillary guys, Ian Schmeichel, Roma Dean, Tyler Burren, who are all able to give you between 4 and 4.6 rebounds per game. They've been a big reason why this team has been able to function the way that they have, as it's a Tulsa team that's a top 65 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and just in every facet of offense, this is a team that is executing really well. For Tulsa, 12th in the nation right now in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and it travels relatively well as well. This is a Tulsa team that, they're not quite the same away from home, but they're still a top 25 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. And for North Texas, things went straight down the tubes when Will McClendon went out for the season due to injury. He was one of their top scorers when he was in there. Now, you do have Jashawn Stevenson, who's able to give you 16.5 points per game, but he shoots 29% from three. North Texas as a whole outside the top 270 with their 31.5% three-point shooting. North Texas still a very rock-solid defense. They've been a top 125 team in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage, and they're allowing teams to shoot less than 30% from three-point range. So I do think that they're going to have a little bit of success there, but still, this is a North Texas group that they are going to be having a little bit of a tough time with matching up with the overall depth that you got for this Tulsa team. You do have David Terrell Jr., who's been able to give you about 11.5 points, 5 assists per game, and he generates about a steal and a half per contest, and Stevenson, 1.6 steals per game as well. North Texas has been very much looking to generate turnovers, a top 25 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but they do leave themselves a little bit vulnerable on the inside. I think that Tulsa is going to do a nice job in terms of taking care of the ball with having multiple ball handlers, and that allows them to be able to break this North Texas defense and be able to get the job done. Did set my line at 8. I'm going to be willing to lay the number and recognize that North Texas, very slow team, about 330th in terms of total possessions per game. I think Tulsa's efficient enough to be able to get you the over. So set my total at 142. I'm also in on that over to go along with Tulsa. 819, 820 on the card. It is Youngstown State, and they're going to be on the road against Northern Kentucky. Northern Kentucky finds themselves as a very slim favorite here of 3.5 points total on this game. 146.5 to 147.5. Set my line at 2. So if the line is thin, I'm going to be willing to take those 3.5 with Youngstown State. It's a Youngstown State group that has been relatively mid-tempo this year, and for Northern Kentucky, neither fast nor slow themselves. They're, in terms of total possessions per game, right around about 132nd in all of college basketball. And for Northern Kentucky, the team is only 206th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, despite being a top 25 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, while Youngstown State, they're more around about 151st, as I do think that you're going to get some sloppy possessions in this game. But for Northern Kentucky, they're one of those teams that, while they generate a lot of turnovers, they gamble for those turnovers, as they are 339th in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, Youngstown State, they, in a road or neutral court environment, allow teams to shoot only 29.1% from three-point range. That's a top 45 mark in all of college basketball. And for Youngstown State, they themselves are a top 100 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. So very well-rounded defense with Chris caroling all the way to giving you 17 points, 4.5 boards. He shoots 46% for three. Youngstown State as a whole, they shoot 35.1% for three, a little bit above country average. Rich Rolfe is a 40% three-point shooter with about 10 points per contest. Vladimir Saladizre has been able to give you about 8.5 points. He shoots 36% from the outside. Emmanuel Zugalov has been able to generate for the team about 1.7 blocks per contest as well. Not quite the shot blocker that Gabe Dines was a season ago at 7'3", but you know what? You've got a 7-footer in Zugalov that's been able to do a nice job in terms of being able to fill those shoes. And then on the Northern Kentucky side of things, you do have LJ Wells, who's been able to do a pretty solid job with about 8 rebounds per game, but he's the lone guy on the roster right now that gives you over 4.3 rebounds per game, so they're going to take it on the chin a little bit down low, despite being a top 175 team in terms of their offensive rebound percentage. They have been outside the top 200 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Now, I do like what the main three-headed monster for this Northern Kentucky does on offense. Dan Gressinger, Khalil Robinson, Donovan Ode, all between 15.6 points and 16.5 points per contest, and Robinson shoots 46% from three, Gressinger 36.5% three-point shooter, and then Ode doesn't really pop it from three, but does generate 2.1 steals per game to be able to headline things there. But I do think that the overall sloppiness is going to be a bit costly to the over in this spot, even though you do have a Northern Kentucky team that gives up quite a few looks from three. So did set a total of 146. You're at the 146.5 plus, in on the under, and I'm willing to take those points with Youngstown State. 821, 822 on the card. It is Northern Iowa, and they're going to be on the road against Evansville. The Purple Aces are a 4.5 to a 5.5 point home underdog. 126.5 to 127.5 is the total. Set a total of 125.5. I'm going to be in on the under, as you got a Northern Iowa team that has very much gotten back to the roots. They are one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball. 355th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Evansville is not necessarily gunning it themselves at 242nd in terms of total possessions per game, and it's an Evansville team that really is allowing it from three-point range. They allow teams to shoot 38.2% from three-point range. That is 341st in all of college basketball. Northern Iowa, 3rd in the country in opponents' three-point shooting percentage. I think that perimeter disparity is going to be big for Northern Iowa. That's a big reason why I'm going to be willing to lay the number now with Northern Iowa. This is also a team that's not going to give you any sort of second and third chances. Northern Iowa is right now grabbing about 6.9 offensive rebounds per game. That is a bottom 10 mark in all of college basketball. That said, you've got Leon Bond in the backcourt, who I really like with about 12 points. He from three-point range shoots 44%. Trey Campbell, 35.5% three-point shooter. Main shooter with 13.5 points, 3.5 boards, 3.5 assists per game. And for Northern Iowa. They do a great job in terms of valuing the ball. Top 25 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. Now, in a nip and tuck spot, they only do shoot about 68% at the free throw line. That is outside the top 265 in all of college basketball. Evansville, meanwhile, they're just not getting a lot going on offense. They are outside the top 275 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They're outside the top 280 in terms of ball security with over 13.5 turnovers per game. They're just built down low. You've got AJ Casey along Connor Turnbull combining for 12 rebounds per game. These are your top two scorers with Turnbull. One guy on the team that gives you double figures with 12.5 points per game, generates about 2.7 blocks per contest as well. And then Joshua Hughes does shoot 41% from three, 9 points per game. He is the only of their top six scorers that shoots above 31.4% from three-point range, so that's a big issue for them. And they just don't even grab second and third chances outside the top 250 in terms of offensive rebound percentage. Outside the top 300 with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage as well. With Northern Iowa having a kryptonite down low, this Evansville team needs to grab those second and third chances, them being unable to do so, and not getting a lot out of Alex Hemaway, who he was a really good shooter over at Clemson back in the day, only about 7 points on 35% three-point shooting. I think Northern Iowa controls the tenor of this game. It's going to be slow, controlled, and Northern Iowa, I think, gets the job done. Set them as a 9.5-point favorite. I'm willing to lay the number in. Me and my total 125.5. I also like this under. 823, 824 on the card. UTEP is on the road against Florida National. Florida National, a 7.5 to an 8.5-point favorite. 149.5 to a 115.5 is the total, and it's a Florida National as an 8.5-point favorite, so going to be willing to lay up to 8 with them. This game should be featuring a whole bunch of turnovers, as these are two of the best teams in all of college basketball with that regard, especially UTEP, because for UTEP, this is a classic case of a team that is going to gamble for a lot of turnovers. For UTEP, right now, they are 279th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. They're allowing teams to shoot over 35.5% from three-point range. UTEP just does nothing on the class either. They are well outside the top 275 in terms of rebound percentage, but this is a team that they play very slowly. They're outside the top 275 in terms of total possessions per game, and they are currently 50th in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, you've got a Florida National team that has just done a great job themselves, 51st in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but Florida National is just the more well-rounded team, and they're the team that's looking to push a lot of tempo, 33rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Main guy for Florida National is the former Meep Road Runner, as you've been able to get a lot of production out of Corey Stevenson, 18 points, 7 boards from three-point. He's shooting 48.5% from three. Should see a little bit of fall off there, but Florida National shooting about 36.9% from three. That's a top 75 mark in all of college basketball. UTEP not doing a great job guarding the arc. That should allow them to be able to do a nice job of exploiting that. Now, this is a Florida National team that is going to allow a lot of second and third chances. And Florida National, they themselves leave a bit of something to be desired defensively, 260th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but they're also giving up about 21.5 points fewer per 100 possessions when they're at home rather than away from home. And for Florida National, they are currently 100th in the country in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. They do leave themselves vulnerable to those second and third chances, as they're 347th in terms of defensive rebound percentage, but it's not like this UTEP team is doing a great job there either, as for UTEP, in terms of defensive rebound percentage, they are 312th, and for UTEP, they lost pretty much the entirety of their backcourt from the season ago. So they've been looking to mix and match with a lot of different guys. Jamal West, 6'6", has been very versatile, 12.5 points, 6.5 boards. He only shoots about 28.5% from three, but gives you a steal on a block per contest. Elijah Jones has been able to give you 14 points per game. But for UTEP, they also shoot 30.6% from three-point range. They really don't have a single guy on the roster that shoots above 34.7% from three-point range, with Killa Blackwell being that guy that shoots 34.7%, 9.5 points per contest. And with this UTEP team also being outside the top 320 with regards to their free throw shooting percentage, going up against the Florida National team that they will put you on the free throw line. This is a Florida National team that is inside the top 150 in terms of foul rate. I do think that this Florida National team finds a way to get the job done, and I just don't think that you get this UTEP team to do enough with the total, and you get a lot of dead possessions in this game. So by total 146.5 in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay up to 8 here with Florida National. 825, 826 on the card. Indiana State, they play us to Drake, and the Drake is a 5.5 to a 6.5 point favorite. 144.5 to 145.5 is the total. Semi total 145.5. So 144.5 is a buy point for me on the over. You've got just two completely different teams in terms of taking care of the ball. Indiana State about 230th in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and has led them to being 278th in terms of points per possession. Drake, a top 150 team in terms of points per possession. They're 22nd in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and Indiana State is allowing a lot of second and third chances in a road or neutral court environment. teams grab 35.5% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. So Drake, who has been a little bit rough on the defensive glass themselves, they should be able to control things with having Oku Frederico give you 12.5 points, 6 boards per contest. Love what Jalen Quinn has brought to the table. Good versatility with 17 points, 4 boards, 3.5 assists. Shoots in the mid-30s from 3. Drake is old. They shoot 36.5% from the outside. And Drake is not going to force the issue on defense. They're outside the top 275 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but top 100 team in terms of keeping you off the free throw line. They've been aligned quite a bit from 3-point range. They're outside the top 250 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, but an Indiana State team that was actually a good 3-point shooting team last year. About 300th in the country at 30.8% from the outside. Ian Scott, great Scott, he shoots 46.5% from 3 with 14 points per contest. And then Campbell Wagner, who's back from season ago, 34.5% 3-point shooter, 12.5 points per contest, but pretty much nobody else on the roster shoots above 31% from 3-point range. Sterling Young, who comes over from Florida A&M, 10 points per contest, hasn't really been able to light it up from 3-point range. You've got an Indiana State team that they themselves have been a top 100 team with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, but the way that they are just losing the battle on the glass, I think is going to be big, and with the way that Drake does a nice job in terms of valuing possessions, I do think that they find a way to be able to persevere, get the job done here at a 145 or less. I do like the over, as you do have a Drake team that is very slow and controlled. They're outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game, but Indiana State cranking it up to 80th in terms of total possessions per game, so like the over, and willing to lay it with the Drake. 827, 828 on the card. Valparaiso is playing us to Illinois Chicago. UIC is an underdog of 3.5 points. 142.5 is the total, and for Valparaiso, made them a 3-point favorite, so 3.5 does become my buy point on Illinois Chicago, as Illinois Chicago is a really interesting team. Top 40 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage. They're also allowing opponents to grab 37.9% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. That's 357th in all of college basketball, and you do have a Valparaiso team that has been able to do a relatively sturdy job on the glass, or country average in terms of their defensive rebound percentage, but they've actually been much better in terms of denying second and third chances on the road rather than at home. And for Valparaiso, I wish I could lay the number with them, but they just can't shoot. These guys are outside the top 320 in terms of both their 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. They do a nice job taking care of the ball. Top 100 team, thirds the fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and have a trio of guys give you double figures. Rakeem Chaney, he shoots 37.5% from 3, 10 points per contest. Owen Dees, who comes over from Texas A&M Corpus Christi, 13 points, 3.5 boards. He shoots 40% from 3. And JT Pettigrew, 5.5 rebounds, 10 points per contest. And I am for Valparaiso, really good at generating second and third chances. They are grabbing about 13.5 offensive rebounds per game. If you look at percentage of missed shots that do result in an offensive rebound, Valparaiso is a top 115 team in all of college basketball. But that's it for Illinois Chicago. I do think that even though they have been quite suspect with their own shooting as well, they do find a way to be able to hold in this game, because you do have veteran leaders in the backcourt, as you've got Ahmad Henderson supplying 14 points. He's in year number 2 of the system, 2.5 assists. He has seen his 3-point shooting fall all the way down to 27.5% from the outside, and UIC has been outside the top 250 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, but they also do a nice job in terms of generating those turnovers on defense. His team, in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, has become a top 75 team in all of college basketball. Now that comes at the expense of giving up quite a few open looks from 3-point range. As Illinois Chicago, about 227th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Teams are shooting about 34% from 3 against outside the top 225 there, and with this Illinois Chicago team, they're going to need to get a little bit more of the Towson transfer. Makai Lowry, 9.6 boards, but he doesn't give you anything from the outside. That said, you've been able to get about a steal and a half per contest when he's been out there in Henderson, and then the Elijah Crawford injury has really been hurting the team with about 7.5 points per game in the games that he's played, but he's been out for about a month. I do expect him to be out a little bit longer, but while Abdul Malmoa has been able to give you about a block and a half per contest for a UIC team that is a top 100 team in terms of block shot per percentage, I do think that that helps them hold in there, and I do think that you get just enough possessions for the over, as you've got an Illinois Chicago team right now checking in about 184th in terms of total possessions per game. Valparaiso about 232nd, but with the way that Valparaiso takes care of the ball, I think they get enough clean possessions here for the over. So at 3.5 plus, we'll take the points with UIC, and I'm in on the over. 829, 830 on the card. Southern Illinois is going to be on the road against Belmont. Belmont is a favorite of 6.5 to 7.5 points. Total on this game, 159.5 to 160.5, and I made Belmont the 11.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Just simply put for the Southern Illinois team. They do not shoot it well from 3-point range. They are outside the top 335 as they shoot 28.2% from 3-point range. Now, they are a top 25 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 2-point range. range, and they're closer to about 100th with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage. Ron House is the lone double-figure scorer, 14.5 points per game. He shoots about 32% from 3-point range, but after this Belmont team was terrible on defense a season ago, they're up to 49th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, you've got a Southern Illinois team that in year number 2 under Scott Nagy, they're starting to crank up that tempo quite a bit. They're about 118th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they're 46th in terms of total possessions per game. You've got a Belmont team that they themselves are going to be looking to push quite a bit of tempo. Belmont finds themselves in the top 80 in terms of total possessions per game, and for Belmont, I do think that they're going to do a nice job lighting up from 3 against a Southern Illinois team that's been a top 175 team in terms of both opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage, but the versatility of 6'8" Sam Mormay, 13.5 points, 6.5 boards, shoots about 35% from 3 combined with Tyler Lundblade, who at 6'6", shoots 93.5% the free throw line, 43.5% from 3-point range. I think is going to be big. Main kryptonite I think you got for Belmont outside the top 3 are in terms of ball security, and you do have a Southern Illinois team that, while they do a relatively good job with regards to just opponent shooting percentages, they're neither here nor there with regards to generating turnovers. In terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, you've got a Southern Illinois team that's clocking in about 161st in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, this is a Belmont team that they themselves are not really going to force the issue a ton, but they are up to about 125th in the country there. And Nick McClain in the backcourt, he's been able to give you 10.5 points, 6.3 assists to about 3.5 turnovers per game, but does shoot 45% from 3-point range. Drew Skanowski being able to give you about 11.5 points per contest is big, and this team does a nice job shutting it down from inside the arc. Belmont, top 25 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. I think that allows them to be able to get the job done by double figures. Did semi total at 157.5. I do think that the Belmont interior defense helps you out with the under, so in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay it with Belmont. 831, 832. It is Bradley. They're going to be on the road against Murray State. Murray State a 5.5 point favorite. Total on this game 158.5 to 159.5. So Murray State is a 5.5 point favorite. I'm seeing a few 5s out there. 5 is my max 5 point on them, as you've got a Bradley team that's looking to play a little bit more mid-tempo at about 135th in terms of total possessions per game. And for Murray State, this team is very much looking to gun it. 41st in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Murray State is forcing everything inside. They're the top team in all of college basketball in terms of allowing the lowest percentage of shots to come from 3-point range. Bradley has been able to ascend a little bit more with their 3-point shooting. Last year, they were actually numero uno in all of college basketball in terms of their 3-point shooting percentage. They're down to about country average this season. Meanwhile, for this Murray State team, they've been able to do a pretty solid job with regards to being able to guard things on the inside. They've been a top 100 team with regards to 2-point shooting percentage. Big thanks to Frederick King for that, as he's given the team 13 points, 8.5 rebounds per game. And then in the backcourt, Javon Jackson has been the main scorer, 16 points on 44% 3-point shooting, as it's a Murray State team that is a top 55 team with their 3-point shooting percentage and their free throw shooting percentage. They're a top 100 team with regards to 2-point shooting percentage as well. So they've just been really efficient in pretty much every facet of the game offensively. And then for Bradley, name of the game for them on defense is generating turnovers. This has become a top 20 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, as you've got Jaquan Johnson being a top 5 player in all of college basketball in terms of steals. 3.4 steals, 3.5 assists, 18 points per game, and he knocks down 38% of his threes. Alex Sebagersay, Demarion Birch, these two guys have combined to shoot about 37.2% from the outside. They both give you 11.5 points per game. They've had AJ Smith do a solid job being able to give the team 5 rebounds per game, though. This is a Bradley team that could be at a little bit more down low outside the top 200 with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage, but much like a lot of teams that generate a lot of turnovers, this is a Bradley team that they sort of, for lack of a better term, they gamble for those turnovers, because when they don't generate a turnover, that leaves them very open from 3-point range. Bradley is right now allowing teams to shoot about 35.1% from 3-point range, shooting 48th in all of college basketball. That goes to 38.4% away from home, and I do think that that's going to be enough for Murray State to be able to get the job done. I do think that you get a lot of dead possessions in this game, and I do think that a Bradley team that is looking to bomb from 3 is going to have a tough time being able to find those looks. So semi-total 151.5. I like the under, and with Murray State, I'm willing to lay up to 5 with them. 833, 834 on the card. It is Portland. They're going to be on the road against San Francisco, and the Dons find themselves as a sizable favorite here of 11.5 to 12.5 points. So last game, 148.5 to 149.5. Semi-line at 11.5. Mostly seeing 12 plus, so going to be willing to take those points with Portland. Portland has been a pretty solid team inside. Top 75 team with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage. Joe Foxwell, Timo George, as freshmen, have been able to combine for just under 26 points per contest, with Foxwell shoots 35.5% from 3, 7.5 assists per game. Issue for this team is turnovers. They are outside the top 320 in terms of their ball security, and Portland is going to give you some open looks from 3-point range. At a road/shoot score venue, teams are right now shooting 41.6% from 3-point range. I think that that's going to see some negative regression in terms of teams not being able to shoot it quite as well from 3-point range, but for San Francisco, they have been able to shoot about 35.5% from 3-point range at home. Their country average team at about 33.2%. I do like the versatility of Bookie Cook. He's been able to give you about 10.5 to 11 points per contest. He shoots over 40% from three-point range. And then Tyrone Riley is right now shooting 46% from the outside, 12.5 points, 5 boards, a steal per contest. Ryan Beasley has been a little bit of a disappointment with his outside shooting, but he does give out about 3 assists per game. It's a San Francisco team that, to the benefit of Portland, does not generate any turnovers whatsoever. Outside the top 330 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and you've got dueling tempos. As for San Francisco, they're about 310th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Portland very much looking to crank up their tempo at 67th in the country with regards to total possessions per game. And when it comes to this Portland bunch, it has been a little bit hit or miss out of Jermaine Balsinger-Webb. He's a true 7-footer, but he's only been able to give you about 3.5 rebounds per game, and the San Francisco team should be able to win the battle down low. Top 125 team with regards to rebound percentage, with David Fuchs leading the way, 7 rebounds, 12.5 points per game, and when you've got legend Smiley being able to give you a little bit along the outside, shooting 36.5% from 3-point, 7 points per game, I do think that that's going to be a little bit tough for Portland to match up with, but again, not having as many turnover woes for Portland, I think is going to be big for them holding in this game. So did set my line at 11.5, 12 plus, won't take those points with Portland, and I'm going to be in on the over. I did set my total at a 149.5 with those clean possessions, 835, 836 on the card. Pepperdine is on the road against Pacific. Let me be specific, as Pacific is a 10.5 to an 11-point favorite, 137.5 is the total, and for Pacific, made them a 9.5-point favorite. So at 10 plus, I'm going to be one take the points with Pepperdine. Pepperdine is a rather mid-tempo team at about 224th in terms of total possessions per game. Pacific is playing quite slowly, 288th in the country with that regard, and Pacific is just not allowing second and third chances. Top 30 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. They've been a country average team with their 3-point shooting, while Pepperdine just does not shoot it well from 3. 29.5%. That is 317th in all of college basketball. But I do think that Pepperdine is going to be able to hold in there because both of these teams are having their turnover issues. Pacific outside the top 3 in terms of taking care of the ball. Pepperdine right there as well with about 13.5 turnovers per game. But having Javon Cooley and Aaron Clark in the backcourt combined for just under 26 points per game is big. Cooley shoots 72% on the free throw line, 36% from 3-point range. And if Pepperdine can find a way to the free throw line, they're a top 35 team, shooting 77% at the charity stripe. With Pepperdine, they're about a country average team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. They've been giving up a lot on the inside, outside the top 270 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. But Style Phipps has good versatility, 11.5 points, 5 assists, 6 rebounds per contest. So I do like his overall game. And for Pacific, Alexis Marmayoles, who is a really good double-figure scorer in the Southland Lions here, just has not been able to get going this year. He continues to only give you about 4.5 points per contest, as Elias Rolfe has been the head of the sink. 17.5 points, 6.5 boards at 6'7". He shoots 42.5% from 3. TJ Wainwright, he shoots 40% from 3. These are like the lone 2 guys on the roster, though, that shoot above 29.6% from 3. The main transfer in Jaden Creighton, he's given up about 5.8 assists, a steal, 8 points per contest, so he's been able to do a solid job there. And with this Pacific team, they've been stout on the inside, top 100 team with regards to opponent's 2-point shooting percentage, top 125 team with their own 2-point shooting percentage. But with Pacific having those turnover woes, I do think that that's going to be a little bit costly to them. I do think that Pepperdine, as a result, is going to be able to hold in this game. And this has been a Pacific team that has been falling quite a bit, while they themselves do shoot 76.3% at the free throw line. So I did set a line of a 9.5 at 10 plus. I'm going to be one to take those points with Pepperdine. And then I did set my total here at a 137.5. I'm right now seeing a 137. I think that this just might be close enough for late game falling. So in on a 137 over, and the points here with Pepperdine, 837, 838 on the card. It is San Diego on the road against Santa Clara. Santa Clara is a favorite here of 15.5 points, 160.5 to 162 is the total. Set my line at 13.5, so we'll take the points with San Diego. San Diego did a really good job of holding in there against Gonzaga a few days ago. Now, for the San Diego team, they're going to get absolutely dump trucked on the glass, but they are a team that does a relatively solid job of being able to find some looks from 3-point range. That does take a big fall off away from home, though. They shoot 37.4% from 3-point range at home, 26.5% in a road/shoot-score venue, but you've been able to have Juan Sebastian Gorosito be able to give you a high 30s 3-point shooting. He's been able to slide the team with 10.5 points per game. Tyler Johnson, who comes over from Louisville, has been that main guy. 14 points, 2.2 steals, 3.5 assists. He shoots 36.5% from 3-point. And then Tunari Lane, he's been able to give you about 10 points per game for San Diego. The big key for them is being able to control this game in the backcourt, because this team is well outside the top 280 in terms of rebound percentage. As a matter of fact, for San Diego, you do not have a single guy on the roster that gives you over 3.9 rebounds per game, with Vuk Bosovic give you 3.9 rebounds and 6.1 points per contest. So that has not been great, to say the least, but this team does have some very good active hands. In terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, you've got a San Diego State team that's currently 31st in all of college basketball. And this has been a Santa Clara team that hasn't been quite the same team with regards to their backcourt, but they have been very good at generating turnovers themselves, 37th in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. As a result, I did set a total here of a 155.5. I'm in on the under, especially with neither team pushing a ton of tempo. Santa Clara is about 186th in terms of total possessions per game. San Diego is hovering right around there, about 191st. And for Santa Clara, you've been able to get quite a bit of production out of Elijah Mai at 6'7", great versatility, 15.5 points, shoots 38.5% from three, 4.5 boards, 2.5 assists per game. And then Christian Hammond, 16.5 points. He shoots 42% from three-point range. But after those two main guys, you see a little bit of a fall off. They've done a good job in terms of providing second and third chances as well. San Diego does not stand a chance on the glass, as Santa Clara, top 125 team with regards to rebound percentage, top 50 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage, but they also do shoot 69.5% at the free throw line. This is a Santa Clara team that's outside the top 200 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. So did set a total here of a 155.5. I think that the turnovers cost you an over, so in on the under, and I'm willing to take 14 plus here with San Diego. 839, 840 on the card. Oregon State is going to be on the road against Washington State. Washington State does find themselves as a favorite of 5.5 points. Total on this game, 143.5 to 144.5. Set Oregon State as a 7.5 point underdog. I'm going to be willing to lay it with Washington State. This team has been really good on the defensive glass. A top 20 team in terms of percentage of opponents missed shots that do not result in an offensive rebound. And have an Oregon State team that's had a tough time taking care of the ball. About 263rd in all of college basketball in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. Now, Washington State, they are a team that's outside the top 300 in terms of their own ball security, and Washington State is not going to force the issue. 320th in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Oregon State is also outside the top 250 with that regard as well, but the big thing for this Oregon State team is that they just are not doing a great job on the glass whatsoever. Oregon State has had a tough time being able to give themselves any sort of a second or third chance. 313th in terms of offensive rebound percentage, and right now Josiah Lake is the lone guy on the roster for Oregon State that's giving you over 5 rebounds per game. That would be a 6'2" guard, 13.5 points. He's actually down to 4.6 rebounds per game, so he's not even giving you 5 rebounds per game. He does shoot 42% from three-point range, and then Isaiah C along with Des White, they've been able to combine to shoot about 37.5% from the outside. Between the two of them, about 20 points per game, and you do get White to be able to give you about a steal per contest as well, but this is also an Oregon State team that has been pretty neither here nor there with regards to their shooting percentages or a country average team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, just outside the top 200 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. And Ace Glass, he has been the ace for this Washington State team. He's given you over 15.5 points per contest, had that big display when he was out there in Maui a few weeks ago, and from 3-point range, he's been able to light it up at a clip of about 37.5% from 3 for Washington State team that they're a little bit down with their 3-point shooting at about 34.5% from the outside, but for Washington State, this has also been a group that has been able to do a little bit better with regards to their interior offense. Top 175 team in terms of their own 2-point shooting percentage. Thomas Redson and Okafor, these two guys both give you between 9.5 to 10 points per game. Emil Yalo has been able to shoot 40% from 3, and he also gives you 9.5 points per game. And Okafor, along with Yalo, they both give you 6 rebounds per game apiece. And with Oregon State, they've got a lot of travel to deal with them being just really not a team that forces the issue on defense. At Washington State being uncharacteristically slow this year, 217th in terms of total possessions per game. Typically, David Riley teams, they play a lot faster. I do think that Washington State is going to be able to push tempo a little bit more here. You've got an Oregon State team that has been playing relatively slowly themselves. They're hovering right around about 291st in terms of total possessions per game, but do play at a clip of about 3.5 possessions per game more away from home rather than at home. So made a total of a 145.5. I like the over. And with Washington State willing to lay up to 7 with them. 841, 842 on the card. Indiana is playing goes to Washington. Washington is a underdog of 7.5 points. 115.5 to 151 is the total. And I said Indiana as a 7.5 point favorite, so we're going to be waiting on a bit of movement, 7 or less. We'll lay with Indiana, 8 or more. Taking the points with Washington, as Washington plays fast, but they don't play like aggressively fast. For Washington, in terms of total possessions per game, they're checking in right in the neighborhood of about 82nd in the country, and this is an Indiana team that's been very mid-tempo, 161st in terms of total possessions per game, and Indiana has been able to do a nice job in terms of being able to prevent second and third chances, but they themselves about 200th in the country with regards to their offensive rebound percentage. Indiana has been able to get great versatility out of the coach's son, as you've had Tucker DeVries come and give the team 16 points, 5.5 boards, 3 assists per game, but it's actually been Lamar Wilkerson with his 3 assists, 19 points, and 43% 3-point shooting that has been the main scorer for this team. And for Indiana. Just a very stout defense in general. They're a top 50 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, top 15 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They don't generate a ton of turnovers, but they've been a top 40 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, you've got a Washington team that they're going to have the best big man in this game. That'd be Hans Steinbach. 18 points, 12 boards, and a pair of assists per contest. He also shoots 46% from three. I think that might see a little bit of a fall off, but Zoom Diallo, Desmond Claude, they combine for about 5.5 assists per game in the backcourt for a Washington team that's been in the top 100 in terms of their own ball security. Washington, though, they're not a great 3-point shooting team. As a matter of fact, they're outside the top 225 in terms of both their 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. They very much rely upon getting to the free throw line. Top 75 team in terms of free throw attempts per possession, and they shoot 77% while they're at the free throw line. That's a top 35 mark in the country, but have to deal with the injury to Wesley Yates. He's out indefinitely. He's been able to give the team 15 points per contest. Bryson Tucker has been in and out of the lineup as well, but Front and Kepadog, way that he's able to give you 7 rebounds per game, I think is going to be able to keep this team very lively. You just don't have a lot of size for Indiana. You obviously have those great ancillary guards, as you've got a guy like a Reed Bailey who does stand 6'11", but he only gives you about 4 boards per contest. He's able to pop it from 3. Dayton Connerway, he's been able to give you about 12 points, 4.5 assists per game, but I do think that Washington going to do a nice job inside. I do think that Indiana going to be solid with their defense, but I do think that with Washington, even with having to go with a lot of travel in this spot, I do think that they hold in there at an 8 or more. Won't take the points with Washington, 7 or less, won't lay with Indiana, and I'm in on the underside by total 147.5, 843, 844 on the card. St. Mary's is going to be playing us to Seattle. Seattle is a 10.5 point underdog total on this game between 139.5 to 140.5, and I said a total of a 137. I'm in on the under. You've got a Seattle defense that has been really good. Like, we saw them be able to go toe-to-toe with Gonzaga, forcing overtime in that game. This Seattle team, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, is 37th in the country, and St. Mary's is 36th. So both of these teams have been just as efficient on the defensive side of things, and for Seattle, they are starting to see a little bit of a fall off with their 3-point shooting after they were just scorching hot to begin the season, but you saw Braden Baldonado shooting 40.5% from 3, 95% the free throw line, 16 points per contest. Will Hembroit has been able to give you 2.5 blocks per game. Now Seattle is going to lose that rebound battle to a St. Mary's team that is a top 15 team with regards to rebound percentage, but they're a top 125 team in terms of their rebound percentage, and Seattle's a top 25 team in terms of block shot rate, as you also have Austin Maurer, who's been able to give you 1.3 blocks per contest. John Suk-Yo, who comes over from Gonzaga, he's got size at 6'7", 11.5 points. He only shoots about 30% from 3, but he's able to give some versatility in the backcourt as well. And then you got a St. Mary's team that has one of the more underrated shooters in all of college basketball, Mikey Lewis, 13.5 points from 3-point range. He's been able to shoot about 38.5% from 3-point range. And then Paulius Martsukis, 18.5 points, about 7 boards, pair of assists per contest. Doesn't necessarily light it up from 3-point range, but this is a St. Mary's team that they do have some sizable home and road splits with regards to their offense, as this has been a team that's been shooting less than 32.5% from 3-point range when they've been away from home. Meanwhile, at home, they're shooting more like 38.3% from 3-point range. And for the Seattle group, they've actually been able to do a really good job when they've been away from home, both on offense and on defense, as they become a top 30 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis away from home. And neither of these teams are going to be looking to push any sort of tempo whatsoever. Seattle's about 141st in terms of total possessions per game, but there are a few overtimes that are thrown in there. If you look at possessions per 40 minutes, more of a country average team. St. Mary's 322nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Andrew McKeever with his 9 rebounds per game should be able to help this team do just enough down low to get the job done. And I did set my line at 13 just because I do think that for St. Mary's, they do a nice job in terms of grabbing those second and third chances. And while Seattle's been able to do a tremendous job defensively, you do have to wonder if there's a little bit of a letdown spot here after they came so close and were unable to pull off that win against Gonzaga. And for St. Mary's, they do a nice job limiting teams from 3-point range at home. Their teams are shooting just 28.2% from 3-point range against them. So did set a total of 137 in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay up to 12.5 with St. Mary's. Last game on the normal Las Vegas betting more before we hit the extra games. 845, 846. It's Gonzaga. They play us to Loyola Marymount. Loyola Marymount is an underdog of between 22.5 to 24 points. So on this game, it is 154 to 154.5. Semi line at 24.5. 24 or less, I'm going to be willing to lay it. Gonzaga is still one of the most well-rounded teams in all of college basketball after a pair of close calls in their last 2 games against San Diego, being pushed to overtime against Seattle. I do think that they're going to look to make a statement here, as for Gonzaga, they've actually been more efficient on the defensive side of things. 19th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but 14th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they're giving up the second fewest amount of points per possession at home of any team in all of college basketball. And they still have the big men that should be able to dominate this game, as you got Graham Ike with 17 points, 8.5 boards, and is rolling it out with about 2.5 assists per game. Braden Huff is up to shooting now about 35% from 3-point range, 18.5 points per game. Gonzaga is very much going to be looking to drive the ball inside, though. They are 20th in the country in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 2-point range, and this Loyola Marymount team has been a top 20 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and good news for them is that they do get back one of their top guys, Jan Vide, who's been dealing with injury. He's come back. He's been able to supply about 14 points, 5 assists. He shoots 54% from 3. That is going to see a little bit of a fall off, and for Loyola Marymount as a whole, top 75 team with regards to a 3-point shooting percentage at 37.3%, and this team has been about a country average team in terms of generating turnovers, neither here nor there, but for this Loyola Marymount team, they do suffer a little bit of issue when they go away from home, and now they have to face off against the Gonzaga team as allowing teams to shoot 24.4% from 3-point range when they're at home. Meanwhile, the Loyola Marymount defense now allows teams to shoot about 35.5% from 3-point range in a roadside court venue. You got Rodney Johnson, though, along with MJ Amy, that both give you 14.9 points per game. Brown shoots 41% from 3-point range. Amy, more around about 38.5% from the outside, and then you do get 6 rebounds per game out of Eric McBride. Jalen Shelley, he's done a nice job, 12.5 points, 3 assists, 6.5 rebounds per game. I do think that Loyola Marymount is going to be able to match up defensively. I do think that the offense, though, really going to struggle in this game, and I do think that Gonzaga, even though they're an up-tempo team, top 50 team in terms of total possessions per game, Loyola Marymount more around about turn 15th, just sucks a life, for lack of a better term, out of this Loyola Marymount offense. So, semi-total 148.5, like the under, and with Gonzaga, willing to lay up to 24 with them, and now we hit the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-607, 306-608. New Haven is on the road. They're facing off against Central Connecticut. Central Connecticut in a 2.5 point favor. 128.5 to a 129.5 is the total. And when it comes to New Haven, I did set them as a underdog of 14.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay with Central Connecticut. This is a Central Connecticut group that has been able to do a really nice job in terms of hitting the boards, and they are going to be, in my opinion, able to take it to a New Haven team that has really struggled on offense. New Haven, a bottom 10 team in terms of total possessions per game, a bottom 10 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, so they are just not getting anything going on the offensive side of things, as his team does not find a way to get to the free throw line. They shoot less than 30% from 3-point range outside the top 300 with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage. You do have Jabari Fitzpatrick, who's been able to give you 12.5 points per game, but for New Haven, one of the big struggles that you have with a team going from the D2 ranks to the D1 level is that they don't have a lot of size, and outside of Andre Pasha, they don't have a single guy that gives you over 5 rebounds per game, and for Central Connecticut, this team has taken a step back on defense. They're well outside the top 200 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're really not generating a lot of turnovers, but what you do have for this team is a squad that is able to shoot it quite well from 3. 38.5% 3-point shooting team, top 30 mark in all of college basketball. Darren Smith at 6'7", providing great versatility. 20.5 points, 5 rebounds, shoots 40% from 3-point range. Melo Sanchez, Jay Rogers, they both shoot 40+% from 3, and Rogers 7.7 assists at 2.1 turnovers per game. Even though Central Connecticut doesn't generate a lot of turnovers, they're a top 75 team in terms of taking care of the ball, and Central Connecticut is a team that is playing very slow and controlled. For Central Connecticut, in terms of total possessions per game, they're about 289th in all of college basketball, so I do think that that's going to be impacting the total, as well as I just don't know if New Haven is going to be able to do their part with it. I did set my total as a result at a 128.5. Right now, we're seeing about 129.5. I would be willing to take a shot on the under, as last year Central Connecticut was a top 40 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. That has fallen outside the top 250 this season. They're still a relatively good team with regards to their interior defense, but still, with New Haven being unable to really pop it from 3-point range and having no size whatsoever, and then additionally having James Jones being able to give you 7 rebounds per game for Central Connecticut, that should allow them to just be able to win this game from within and just dominate a New Haven team that I think is going to get a rude awakening here in NEC play. Set my line at 14.5. I'm willing to lay the number, and at 129 plus, I like the under. 306-609, 306-610. Long Island is on the road against Chicago State. Chicago State, a home underdog of 8.5 points. 152.5 is the total, and for Long Island, I did set them as a favorite here of 8 points, so at 8.5 plus, that does become my value point on Chicago State. It's a Long Island team that's looking to push tempo. They're up to the top 105 in terms of total possessions per game, but they're allowing a lot of second, third chances. 332nd in terms of defensive rebound percentage, over 34% of opponents' missed shots become an offensive rebound now. Chicago State, even worse, 351st in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage, but has been a Chicago State team that's been relatively respectable in terms of generating turnovers. Country average team in terms of turnovers forced force on a per possession basis. They don't do a bad job of taking care of the ball. Now, this is a brutal shooting team. Chicago State is shooting less than 30% from three, outside the top 330 in all of college basketball there. But Doyle Cockrell, 13.5 points. He shoots 40.5% from three-point range, doles out a pair of assists per contest. You've been able to get CJ Ray going, shooting 33% from three. He's up to about 10.5 points per contest. So he's in there about 4.5 rebounds per game. And right now, he's the top rebounder for this team. So that's a little bit of an issue against an LIU team that a really nice trio of scorers out there in the backcourt as Malachi Davis, 16.5 points, 3.5 assists. He only shoots about 33% from three-point range, but Jamal Fuller continues to shoot 50% from three, so he has been making it Fuller from the outside, 15.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, and then Greg Gecko-Gordon, 14.5 points, 3 assists, nearly 2 steals per contest. So with this LIU team, even though they have a rough time holding onto the ball, they're outside the top 310 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. They still have been a top 175 team in terms of generating turnovers themselves, but they are very vulnerable on the inside. They're outside the top 290 with regards to opponents' two-point shooting percentage, and with the Chicago State team being as brutal as they are with their three-point shooting, I think that that's going to help them hold in this game. Chicago State country average team about 174th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, so circumstance where I did semi-total at a 154, I'm going to be in on the over, and at 8.5 plus, won't take those points with Chicago State. 3 at 6-6-11, 3 at 6-6-12, Lemoyne is going to be on the road against Mercyhurst. Mercyhurst, a 1.5 point favorite to a 1.5 point underdog, depending upon your book. 145.5 is the total, and for Mercyhurst, I did set them as a 5-point favorite, so whether it be as a slight favorite or a slight underdog, I'm going to be willing to take a shot on them. This is a Mercyhurst team that is a top 80 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis at home. They've been able to do a pretty solid job in terms of generating turnovers as well. They're a top 50 team in terms of turnovers per possession in their home games. Now, Mercyhurst not going to give you a lot from the outside the top there with regards to a three-point shooting percentage, but you do have a nice headline scorer in Bernie Blunt, 16.5 points. He shoots 39% from three-point range, and Jake Lulleman gives you 3 assists per contest. Seton 12.5 points. He shoots more around about 34% from three. Outside those two guys, you just get no outside shooting whatsoever, but having Kadir Martinell, they'll give you about 6.5 boards and 2 blocks per contest. That's big, and on the flip side of things, you just don't have a lot with this Lemoyne team with regards to shot blocking, but Shiloh Jackson, who comes over from Texas A&M Corpus Christi, that very much helps his team out down low. He's been able to notch about 8.5 rebounds per game, throws in there 14.5 points, pair of assists per game. This is a bunch that has just had a tough time taking care of the ball, though. For Lemoyne, outside the top 300 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, they make up for it with shooting about 37% from three-point range. That's the top 75 mark in all of college basketball. Trent Mascara has been that top three-point shooter, shooting 41% from three, 14.5 points per game. But despite the fact that this is a good three-point shooting team, they're still looking to drive the ball inside. They're a top 100 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from two-point range. And for this Lemoyne team, for as bad as they are at guarding the three-point line, as they are outside the top 350 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, are allowing teams to shoot over 39% from three-point range. They've actually done a relatively solid job with regards to their interior defense for this Lemoyne team. They're allowing teams with regards to their two-point shooting percentage, not a lot of anything at all. They're 34th in the country, and if you look at Lemoyne in a roadside shoot-to-core venue, they actually become a top 20 team with regards to opponents' two-point shooting percentage, but they're also getting blasted on the defensive glass, as well as they're allowing a lot of second and third chances for Lemoyne. 251st in terms of offensive rebound percentage, and I do think that those turnovers going to be very costly, and you're going to have yourself a little bit of a tempo war as well. Lemoyne about 200th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Mercyhurst playing super duper slow, 354th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Did set a total as a result at a 141. So along with Lemoyne laying a small number / being a small underdog, I'm going to be in on the under as well. 3 at 6-6-13, 3 at 6-6-14. Wagner is going to be playing host to Stone Hill. Stone Hill does find themselves as a underdog here of between 7.5 to 8 points, and total on this game, it is 136 to 136.5. Saw an opener of a 135. Did set a total here of a 136.5. I would like the over. For Wagner, they're under an interim coaching regime, and that is push their tempo up big time. They're now about 185th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Typically, they're outside the top 340, and Stone Hill is about 234th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Now, for Stone Hill, this team is just getting absolutely blasted in the turnover battle, as this team has been outside the top 320 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, a bottom 15 team in terms of generating turnovers on defense. I do think that they're going to be able to hold in there, though. I did set Stone Hill as a 6.5 point underdog, top 175 team in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage. Still deal with the injury to Will Batchelor, and that's caused the offense to be in all sorts of flux. But Herman Coffey, about 15 points per game. He's been able to shoot 40% from three. You've got Ramon Espinal Guzman, who comes over from Sacred Heart, 9.5 points, 7 boards. He shoots in the mid-30s from three-point range. And then you've got a 37% three-point shooter in Rex Sutherland, who's been all around the block. He began his career over at New Hampshire. He's been able to give you some nice production. And for this Wagner team. Typically, this is a very nice, rock-solid defense, and that has just not been the case for them thus far this season, as Wagner is allowing teams to shoot about 34.5% from three-point range. That clocks in outside the top 215 in all of college basketball. And for Wagner, they're just allowing way too many second and third chances as well. Wagner, 305th in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage, 33% of opponents' missed shots. Become an offensive rebound. You have been able to get, though, about 6.5 rebounds per game out of Xavier Fitch, one of the main holdovers, 7.5 points per game. And Nick Jones has become a nice go-to scorer. 2.5 assists. He supplies 15 points. Shoots about 31% from three. Wagner, country average team with about 34.9% three-point shooting, but they themselves outside the top 275 in terms of ball security, and they're outside the top 250 in terms of generating turnovers as well. So two teams have turned the ball over a ton. Should be able to see more clean possessions in this game. With Wagner giving up a lot of second and third chances, I think that that's enough for Seton to be able to hold in this game. So I did set my total at 136.5, like the over, and I do like 7+ here with Seton as we do wrap things up with 306, 615, 306, 616. St. Francis, Pennsylvania plays host to Fairleigh Dickinson. Fairleigh Dickinson hopes to be fairly priced as 1.5 to 2.5 point road favorites. Tonight's game, 145.5. So Fairleigh Dickinson as the underdog of 1.5 points. I'm going to be willing to take St. Francis outright on the money line for St. Francis and Fairleigh Dickinson. Man, these two teams are rough with regards to their defense. They're both outside the top 340 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and St. Francis is a bottom 10 team with that regard. Fairleigh Dickinson has also really slowed themselves down, 269th in terms of total possessions per game, and St. Francis has sped themselves up, 107th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. But I do think what is going to be key for St. Francis is winning the turnover battle. They're 71st in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis at home, and they've got Sky Wicks, 18 points, 7.5 boards, 2.5 assists, 6'6" combo player that's been able to shoot 35.5% from three. Much needed for a bunch that both of these teams are also outside the top 3 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. So, man, you've got both of these teams doing a rough job there. St. Francis really giving it up from three. Teams are shooting over 38.5% from three against them, bottom 10 mark in all of college basketball. Fairleigh Dickinson outside the top 3 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, but I like what I'm seeing out of Zion Russell, who's been able to supply about 11.5 points per contest, and then you've got Ahmad Harrison, who's been able to throw in there about 6 points per contest. Now, Sky Wicks has been dealing with a little bit of injury, but did return in that game against Lemoyne, so he should be all good to go in this game. And then on the flip side for Fairleigh Dickinson, typically this is a team that's like almost entirely based around their guard play, but they've went a little bit bigger this year with Cyril Martinoff, a true 7-footer who's able to give you about 5.5 boards, 8.5 points per game. Eric Parnell is right now the lone double-figure scorer, 12 points per game. He does shoot 38% from three. Team as a whole is only shooting about 32.5% from the outside, and they are outside the top 3 with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage. Fairleigh Dickinson having a very difficult time taking care of the ball. They're outside the top 3 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and to the credit of Fairleigh Dickinson, they've been more of a country average team with regards to their defensive rebound percentage. They're grabbing a few more second and third chances themselves, but with having those turnover issues, with St. Francis doing a nice job being able to generate turnovers, and this team deal with a few injuries as you've had Arthur Cox along Noah Melson be in and out of the lineup. Now Melson should be good to go in this game, but played just 12 minutes in that last game against Mercy York, did not score a single point. Have to wonder how healthy he is going to be. I do think that this is going to be a little bit more of an up and down game, and I do think that St. Francis gets the job done. I set my total at 155.5. I like the over, and with St. Francis, like them outright on the money line, and that'll wrap things up for the Sunday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. If you do like what you're hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one or two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind there's CM, they mean does not matter, so per usual, please do send these into the timeline. The other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. I'm going to be with you guys every single day, give you picks and analysis on every game, every day, so I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you so much.